Chapter 1724. After Zhou made Primordial Spore an evolvable companion beast, he hadn't found a suitable way to evolve it to a higher level. In the past, Primordial Spore had once devoured other spores to evolve. Now that there were spores everywhere in the valley, he didn't know if he could let Primordial Spore devour them to evolve. However, Primordial Spore's level was too low. He was afraid that it would be devoured here, so Zhou didn't dare rashly attempt it. He planned on experimenting in-game in the future. The Immortal Sword is at the end of the valley. We have to rush over as soon as possible. Don't use spatial teleportation here, and don't fly too fast. Follow me, Lu Yun said as he soared into the sky and slowly flew towards the end of the valley. Why can't I fly too fast? Zhou could understand that he couldn't use spatial teleportation. There were spores everywhere. If he used spatial teleportation, his body might overlap with the spores after teleporting out. It was equivalent to him taking the initiative to put the spores into his body. That was equivalent to courting death. There are too many spores. If we fly too fast, we will attract a large number of spores. Don't think that it's easy to isolate them, but it's different when there are more. Anyway, this place is very dangerous. It's more reliable for us to follow the old man's method, Lu Yun explained. Zhou nodded and slowly flew behind Lu Yun. The lone peak towered into the clouds, but the mountain was somewhat strange. Typical mountain peaks were narrow at the top and wide at the bottom. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to withstand the pressure of the rocks and would easily collapse. However, this mountain peak was narrow at the bottom, wide in the middle, and narrow at the top. It was like a strange, shuttle-shaped mountain that stood at the end of the valley. From afar, it looked like it would collapse at any moment. Under this strange mountain peak, a man and a woman were looking up at the mountain peak. Immortal Supremacy. The Immortal Sword is inserted at the top of the mountain. However, there is a phoenix resting on this mountain. Once we approach the mountain, we will attract the phoenix's attack. I can only send you here, Immortal Supremacy, Wang Mingyuan said in a neutral tone as he stood behind the woman. The woman stared at the mountain for a long time before saying, "What you said is true. The Immortal Sword is really at the top of the mountain. This mountain is indeed protected by a phoenix." "How would I dare lie to you, Immortal Supremacy?" Wang Mingyuan said. "However, since I have personally come, you only need to follow me up the mountain. Although the phoenix is an ancient divine creature, with me here, I won't be able to harm you in the slightest," the woman said indifferently. "Celestial Supremacy, according to our agreement, I'm only responsible for bringing you to the Celestial Sword. Furthermore, with my meager combat skills, I'll only cause trouble if I follow you up. I won't be of much help." Wang Mingyuan's underlying meaning was that he was unwilling to follow the woman up the mountain. The woman said without batting an eyelid, "Everyone in the world knows that the phoenix has 5 colors. The female is the phoenix, and the male is the phoenix. Mortals see the dragon as the image of the emperor, and the phoenix as the image of the emperor and the concubines. But they don't know that at the beginning of the chaos, the yin and yang qi in the world were the phoenix and the dragon. That was the real phoenix." After a pause, the woman continued, "At the beginning of the world, before the human race was born, dragons and phoenixes roamed the world. There was a great battle that almost tore the world apart. Do you know who the final victor was? I've only heard of the dragon and phoenix tribulation, but I don't know who won in the end. But if I were to guess, it should be the Phoenix clan," Wang Mingyuan said. "The Buddha clan is willing to put you in such an important position. It seems like you're truly extraordinary." The woman glanced at Wang Mingyuan and continued, "The dragon is yin and the phoenix is yang. The battle between the dragon and phoenix was indeed won by the phoenix. Although it was a Pyrrhic victory and it was injured, it still obtained the dragon's yin. Only by combining yin and yang can one be called a phoenix. Mortals see the dragon as the image of an emperor and believe that it has a pure yang physique. But in reality, It's just a misconception. How could such a filthy creature have a pure yang physique? It's just that after the dragon and phoenix tribulation, the phoenix's vitality was greatly injured and it has long gone into seclusion. The phoenix that the mortals saw later on was only an ordinary bird that had obtained a bit of the phoenix's true blood. The true inheritance of the phoenix's bloodline has 7 colors. The yin and yang 7-colored divine radiance can split the sun and moon. How can it be compared to the phoenix's insignificant flames? The woman retracted her gaze and looked at Wang Mingyuan. In the legends of you humans, there is a saying that the phoenix gave birth to a golden-winged roc and a peacock. Although there are many distortions in this legend, there is one thing that is correct. The abilities of the golden-winged roc and the peacock do indeed come from the phoenix. It's just that they haven't obtained its essence. I've also heard that the peacock has a 5-colored divine radiance. I presume that it came from the phoenix. Wang Mingyuan continued. That's not bad. However, the 5-colored divine radiance is naturally much inferior to the phoenix's 7-colored divine radiance, the woman said indifferently. However, the current phoenix has ultimately injured its essence foundation. It'll be difficult for it to recover its former might. Furthermore, the phoenix here can't be the one from the chaos. It's just a descendant that has been passed down. If it doesn't enter the apocalypse, it will ultimately be considered immortal. Just go up. With me around, it won't be able to harm you at all. Since the woman had already said that, Wang Mingyuan knew that he had no choice but to go up. All he could do was nod and say, "I'll listen to your instructions." The woman didn't say anything else as she walked towards the strange mountain. Wang Mingyuan followed behind her as he stared at the mountain without any change in expression. However, Wang Mingyuan was puzzled. I got her to enter through the north gate and take such a long detour. Why haven't Lu Yun and Zhou Wen arrived yet? Could something have happened? Although Wang Mingyuan was puzzled, he didn't show it on his face as he followed the woman up the mountain. Just as the two of them reached the mountain peak, they heard a phoenix cry that alarmed the clouds. A 7-colored beam of light tore through the clouds from the top of the mountain like a rainbow piercing through the sky as it pounced towards the two of them. If Zhou Wen were here, he would definitely be no stranger to the 7-colored divine light. Inside the 7-colored divine light was a 7-colored phoenix. The 7-colored divine light around it was identical to the 7-colored flames that Zhou Wen had seen. However, this 7-colored divine light's 7-colored divine light was purer and thicker than the 7-colored phoenix's 7-colored divine light in the garden. It was no longer possible to tell the original form of the flames. All one could see was the color of light. When the woman saw the 7-colored divine light charging at her, she had no intention of dodging. She gestured with her hand and formed a sword stance with her index and middle finger. She tapped the air and pointed at the 7-colored divine light. An invisible sword chi shot out from his finger. The sword chi was formless and colorless. It could not be seen with the naked eye, but the intent of the sword chi made people feel as if a sharp sword was going against the heavens to meet the rainbow-like 7-colored divine light that pierced down from the sky. Chapter 1725. The sword aura and the rainbow light collided, but there was no sound. The two powers strangely entangled with each other, like two strings intertwining to form a rope. The woman stood at the foot of the mountain, while the phoenix flew halfway up the mountain. The woman and the bird seemed to be in a tug-of-war. The situation didn't seem too tense, but in reality, it was a dangerous situation that could affect the whole situation. The two powers entangled with each other. If one side's power was slightly weaker, the two powers would immediately backfire. So, they could only keep squeezing out their own power to fight each other to the end. They didn't dare to relax at all. The phoenix is under my control. Go and kill it. While the woman was fighting the phoenix, she suddenly said to Wang Mingyuan indifferently. Wang Mingyuan frowned. The woman had asked him to fight now. She had ulterior motives. If she didn't have the power to kill the phoenix, she needed Wang Mingyuan to win. If Wang Mingyuan turned on her now, it would be the best time to kill her. But on the other hand, this could be a test for Wang Mingyuan. But who could guarantee that she didn't really have any more power left? If Wang Mingyuan really had other intentions, he would probably miss a great opportunity. If it was someone else, they might have hesitated, but Wang Mingyuan didn't hesitate at all. He used his hand as a knife and generated a knife aura that was like ice and lightning. He swung his hand at the phoenix in the sky. The phoenix couldn't dodge because the woman was holding it back. The knife aura hit its body. It was like a sharp knife cutting through flesh. Its body was cut in half. The seven-colored divine light dissipated, and the phoenix's body exploded in all directions. However, in the next second, the scattered seven-colored divine light gathered together again and instantly formed the phoenix again. The phoenix spread its wings, and the rainbow feathers on its body shone. It was like a rainbow sun, and the light radiated in all directions. Wang Mingyuan quickly retreated like a ghost, but his speed was not as fast as the seven-colored divine light. Seeing that he was about to be injured by the seven-colored divine light, he could only condense the power of ice and lightning again in an attempt to resist the seven-colored divine light. But when the light of ice and lightning touched the rainbow light, it immediately disintegrated. It couldn't even resist for a moment. Wang Mingyuan tried his best to retreat, but he couldn't escape the radiance of the rainbow divine light. The armor on his body melted instantly, as if it wasn't a hard armor, but a piece of white snow. The snow-white skin and muscles under the armor melted the moment they came into contact with the rainbow divine light. In the blink of an eye, white bones could be seen. Just as Wang Mingyuan's body was about to be completely enveloped by the rainbow divine light, an invisible force seemed to separate his body from the rainbow divine light, forming a clear barrier. The woman's body emitted an infinite amount of sword energy. The invisible and colorless sword energy was so dense that even the tip of a needle couldn't pierce through it. It forcibly blocked the rainbow divine light. The yin-yang rainbow divine light can disintegrate all things, but my incorporeal sword beam is not one of them, the woman said coolly. Immortal Sovereign is indeed extraordinary. Wang Mingyuan lowered his head and looked at his chest. The flesh there had already melted away, revealing his ribs. He could even vaguely see his beating heart. Focus on healing yourself. After saying that, the woman ignored Wang Mingyuan. She stared at the phoenix, and the sword intent emanating from her body became increasingly incorporeal. The incorporeal sword beam fought against the yin-yang rainbow divine light. Gradually, the incorporeal sword beam gained the upper hand. The invisible and colorless sword energy forcibly suppressed the divine light, forcing it to converge. The phoenix let out a cry and the divine light shone even more brilliantly. However, it was unable to turn the situation around. In the end, it is not the phoenix from the beginning. The woman sighed and took a step forward. Thousands of sword beams broke through the divine light, instantly piercing through the phoenix's body. The phoenix's colorful body was instantly cut into specks of light. However, in the next second, the specks of light gathered together to reform the phoenix's body. Seemingly aware of the woman's power, the phoenix let out a long cry and turned to fly back up the mountain. Let's go. We'll go up the mountain to check out the immortal sword. The woman did not chase after the phoenix. Instead, she turned to look at Wang Mingyuan. Seeing that the wound on Wang Mingyuan's chest had yet to heal, Wang Mingyuan's healing power seemed to be useless against it. There was a faint seven-colored light around the wound, preventing the flesh from regenerating and healing. The woman waved her hand and an invisible sword beam suddenly slashed towards Wang Mingyuan. Wang Mingyuan did not move at all, allowing the invisible sword beam to slash his body. The sword beam tore open his wound again, causing more blood to flow out. Why didn't you dodge? The woman looked at Wang Mingyuan and asked. If an immortal sovereign wanted to kill a minor character like me, there would be no need to wait until now. As Wang Mingyuan spoke, he once again used his healing power. This time, his flesh quickly regenerated and the wound healed in an instant. Not bad. After saying that, the woman turned and walked up the mountain. Wang Mingyuan followed behind the woman, and the two of them walked up the mountain. The phoenix could fly freely on the mountain, but the woman and Wang Mingyuan could only walk up the mountain. Even a powerful existence like the woman could not fly freely on this unique mountain like the phoenix. Without the phoenix's obstruction, the two of them quickly reached the mountain top. There was a grassy field on the mountain top. In the middle of the grassy field, there was a stone stele. A sword was stabbed into the stone stele, leaving only the sword hilt outside. The body of the sword was completely stabbed into the stone stele. When the sword strikes, heaven and earth will be destroyed, Daluo Golden Celestial End. The woman looked at the stone tablet and slowly read out the words on it. Her expression became somewhat grim. I wonder who carved these words. They are so arrogant, Wang Mingyuan said. They are not human, the woman said coldly. Not human. Wang Mingyuan looked at the woman with a puzzled expression. This time, the woman did not answer. She waved her hand and an incorporeal sword beam slashed at the stone stele with the immortal sword. Dang! 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 When the sword beam struck the stone stele, there was the sound of a blade breaking. The stone stele was completely undamaged. The incorporeal sword beam that was powerful enough to break through the rainbow divine light was unable to leave a mark on the stone stele. The woman was slightly taken aback. She looked at the stone stele with a frown and muttered to herself, "Do you hate immortals that much? Even in death, you still want to become enemies with immortals?" After staring at it for a moment, the woman slowly walked towards the stone stele. Standing in front of it, she reached out to grasp the sword hilt and muttered again, "No matter how much you hate immortals, so what? In the end, you are also one of them. How can you say something like destroying heaven and extinguishing immortals? It's just a joke." After saying that, the woman pulled out the sword with all her might, wanting to pull the immortal sword out of the stone stele. As the woman poured endless power into the sword hilt, the entire mountain seemed to tremble. However, the sword did not move at all. It did not even move an inch. Chapter 1726. Zhou Wen and Lu Yun carefully passed through the canyon and finally stood in front of the strange mountain. Kunlun is indeed a mysterious place. We can't see such a strange and tall mountain even after walking so far. We can only see it when standing at the foot of the mountain. If we were to fly, I'm afraid we would crash into it, Lu Yun sighed. Just as Zhou Wen was about to say something, he suddenly saw the mountain shake. Oh no, we were still too late. From the looks of it, the immortals are already retrieving the sword. What did I say? I told you not to wander around, but you refused to listen. It's too late for regrets now, Lu Yun said gloomily. I'm afraid the immortals haven't managed to retrieve the sword, Zhou Wen said as he stared at the mountain. You can see it? Lu Yun looked at Zhou Wen in puzzlement. In such a mysterious place, even all-seeing eyes can't see more than 100 meters. How can I see it? Zhou Wen shook his head. Then how do you know that the immortals haven't managed to retrieve the sword? Lu Yun asked. A man's intuition. Zhou Wen didn't explain as he walked up the mountain. What are you doing? Lu Yun hurriedly stopped Zhou Wen. Teacher told us to retrieve the sword before the immortals come. Now that the immortals are already retrieving the sword, aren't you just asking for trouble if you go up now? If teacher really wanted us to retrieve the sword in advance, he wouldn't have informed us so late. I'm afraid he wanted us to meet the immortals, Zhou Wen said as he walked. He had already stepped onto the mountain peak. Then all the more you can't go up. You know it's a trap, but you still jumped in? Although Lu Yun said that, he followed. It doesn't matter if it's a trap or not. I just want that sword. Go back first. I'll go up and take a look. If it doesn't work, I'll naturally leave, Zhou Wen said. That's fine. With that turtle shell protecting you, you don't have to worry about escaping. Lu Yun stopped and didn't follow Zhou Wen up the mountain, but he had no intention of leaving. Zhou walked towards the top of the mountain step by step. Lu Yun had told him not to fly on this mountain unless it was absolutely necessary, nor was he to use spatial teleportation abilities. Lu Yun didn't know the consequences of using them. Those words had been passed on verbatim from Jing Daoxian. At the top of the mountain, the woman loosened her grip on the sword hilt and said to Wang Mingyuan, who was standing beside her, "You draw the sword." "Immortal sovereign, you must be joking. How can I possibly pull out a sword that even you can't?" Wang Mingyuan said calmly. "I have my reasons." "Just go and draw the sword," the woman said indifferently. "Yes, immortal reverend." Wang Mingyuan didn't say anything else. He walked up to the stone tablet and reached out to grab the hilt of the sword. He tried to pull the sword out, but it didn't budge at all. "Even a human can't pull it out?" The woman frowned slightly. "I can no longer be considered a human." Wang Mingyuan let go and stepped aside. "That makes sense. In that case, let's find a pure human and try it out." After saying that, the woman turned around to descend the mountain. However, when she lowered her head, she saw a figure approaching from the middle of the mountain. "Who else here knows about this?" The woman turned her head and stared at Wang Mingyuan. "I've never told anyone about my discovery of this place. I don't know if others have discovered this place." Wang Mingyuan's expression didn't change. He looked as usual as he continued, "If it's a human, wouldn't that be perfect? Immortal supremacy wouldn't have to search for people outside." The woman couldn't tell if Wang Mingyuan was lying, so she didn't ask any further. She turned her head to look at the figure at the foot of the mountain, hoping to determine who it was. On this strange mountain peak, the woman's vision was greatly affected. From afar, she could only see the silhouette of a figure. Zhou eyesight clearly wasn't that strong. When the woman saw him, he hadn't seen her figure. By the time he saw the woman's figure on the mountaintop, the woman had already seen his appearance clearly. "Wang Mingyuan, don't tell me that there's such a coincidence in this world. Others haven't discovered the secret of Kunlun Mountain, but the two of you happened to discover the same secret." The woman's gaze at Wang Mingyuan had already turned cold. "There are many coincidences in this world. This isn't surprising. I can swear on my soul that I've never told this secret to my disciple," Wang Mingyuan said as he began to swear. When the woman saw Wang Mingyuan really swear a soul oath, although she was still in disbelief, it was impossible for the soul oath to have no reaction if Wang Mingyuan was lying. It meant that he wasn't lying. "From the looks of it, it's really a coincidence." As the woman spoke, she seemed to be preparing to turn around to look down the mountain. However, before she could turn around, she suddenly slashed at Wang Mingyuan. This slash was too sudden, and the woman's incorporeal sword beam was too fast. Before Wang Mingyuan could react, his head was cleaved off by the incorporeal sword beam. When Wang Mingyuan's head flew down from midair, his face was filled with shock and disbelief. It was as though he had never expected the woman to kill him. He couldn't believe it even in death. The path of immortality can't tolerate a speck of dust. The woman seemed to have done something trivial. She didn't even look at Wang Mingyuan's corpse. Under the incorporeal sword beam, it was impossible for anyone to survive unless Wang Mingyuan had the Phoenix's Nirvana rebirth powers. Unfortunately, Wang Mingyuan wasn't a phoenix, so he didn't have the ability to resurrect. Wang Mingyuan's corpse and head fell down the mountain. Zhou was still sizing up the woman when he suddenly saw something roll down. On closer inspection, his expression changed drastically. "Teacher!" Zhou reached out to grab Wang Mingyuan's body and head. After confirming it again, his expression turned even uglier. It was indeed Wang Mingyuan's corpse. He was completely dead. In an instant, Zhou seemed to make up his mind. He surprisingly threw Wang Mingyuan's corpse and ran down the mountain. The so-called emotions of humans are really hypocritical. The woman was first taken aback before a sneer suffused her lip. She walked down the mountain. She didn't walk fast, as though she was taking a leisurely stroll. However, as Zhou ran at full speed, the distance between them shortened. Just as Zhou reached the mountainside, he heard a cold voice behind him. The voice seemed to come from behind his neck. "If you continue running, I'll chop off your head like your teacher." Zhou's body instantly froze. He stopped in his tracks, not daring to run. He slowly turned around and saw the woman standing less than 3 meters behind him. She was staring at him coldly. "Sister, I don't think we know each other, right?" Zhou revealed a stiff smile as he looked at the woman. End of this chapter. Chapter 1727. Are the elites of humans as cunning as you? The woman said as she stared coldly at Zhou. Seeing that the woman didn't immediately attack, Zhou seemed to realize something as he said in thought, "That's not right. You make it sound like you're not human." "How could I be a lowly creature like a human?" The woman said indifferently, "I'll give you 2 choices now. Do you want to live or die?" The way the woman spoke made it seem as though Zhou's life was already in her grasp. As long as she moved her fingers slightly, she could crush him to death. "Sigh, who would want to die if they could live?" Zhou sighed. "Since you want to live, then come with me," the woman said as she turned around and walked toward the top of the mountain. Zhou hesitated for a moment before following the woman to the mountaintop. As he walked, he asked, "Why do you want me to follow you up the mountain?" "Do what you originally wanted to do," the woman replied. "I really don't know what I originally wanted to do. Why don't you explain it more clearly?" Zhou said, "If you wish to die, continue acting dumb." The woman didn't seem willing to waste her breath on Zhou as she sped up the mountain. Zhou originally wanted to get some information out of her, but he didn't say anything when he heard the woman say so. Soon, he followed the woman back to the mountaintop. The stone monument and sword hilt on the mountaintop remained the same. Zhou naturally saw them at a glance and couldn't help but recite, "When the sword strikes, heaven and earth are destroyed, zenith heaven golden immortal extinction." "Go and pull that sword out," the woman said expressionlessly. "Why do you want me to draw the sword? What kind of sword is that?" Zhou asked the woman, but he thought to himself, could this be the immortal vanquishing sword of the 4 immortal vanquishing swords? The sword didn't have any aura, so Zhou couldn't sense if it was the immortal extinguishing sword from the same set as the immortal culling sword. "If you have the time to talk so much, why don't you just pray that you can pull the sword out? Otherwise, your teacher will be your example," the woman said coldly. "You killed my teacher just because you couldn't pull out this sword?" Zhou asked in surprise. "Don't test my patience." If not for the fact that she didn't want to go through the trouble of finding another human, the woman probably wouldn't have allowed him to speak so much. "Do you mean what you say? If I pull out the sword, will you really let me go? You won't burn the bridge after crossing it, right?" Zhou sized up his surroundings and didn't find the phoenix that Lu Yun had mentioned. He thought that it might have been killed by a woman. "I can only preserve my life in front of the phoenix, but this woman can kill the phoenix. I wonder if the chaos egg can withstand her attack." Logically speaking, Earth hasn't completely broken out of its restrictions. Dimensional creatures will still be greatly restricted on Earth. Even if she's at the apocalypse stage, she shouldn't be able to unleash strength at the apocalypse stage on Earth. "My words are the golden rule," the woman said. "Then I'll believe you this once." As Zhou spoke, he walked towards the stone monument. When he arrived in front of it, he didn't grab the hilt of his sword. Instead, he bowed at the stone monument and seemed to be muttering something, but it was impossible to tell what he was saying. "What are you doing?" the woman asked with a frown. "Didn't you ask me to pray first?" "I'm praying for the heavens to bless me and let me pull the sword out of the stone monument," Zhou said in all seriousness. The woman didn't say anything else as she looked coldly at Zhou. Zhou chanted for a while before looking up and reaching out to grab the hilt of the sword on the stone monument. The hilt didn't resemble the immortal culling sword's hilt in any way, making Zhou suspect if it was the immortal extinguishing sword. Logically speaking, there should be some similarities between the 4 swords in a set. Who cares if it's the one or not? I'll pull it out first. Whoever pulls it out naturally owns it, Zhou thought as he grabbed the hilt with both hands and pulled. The woman stared at the hilt, but when she saw that it remained motionless, she immediately lost interest in Zhou. She raised her hand, about to use the incorporeal sword beam to kill him. Originally, the Immortals had the intention of making Zhou their spokesperson, but Zhou had never taken the memento to the Immortals. Rejecting them meant that the Immortals were their enemies. The fewer enemies like Zhou on Earth, the better. Wait, I didn't use my luck just now. When I use my luck, I'll definitely be able to pull it out, Zhou hurriedly said. It wasn't that he was afraid of fighting a woman. After all, he would have to fight sooner or later, so it was useless to be afraid. However, if he could pull out the sword first, it would naturally be better than being empty-handed. When the woman heard him say that, she didn't immediately kill him. She only said coldly, "I don't have that much time to waste on you. I'll give you 30 seconds. Zhou didn't know how long 30 seconds was. Since the woman was willing to let him try, he would continue. He first circulated the small Perfection of Wisdom Sutra and tried to pull out the sword again, but the sword remained motionless. Zhou had no choice but to switch to the First Order of Chaos before attempting to pull out the sword. However, the sword seemed to have taken root. No matter how hard Zhou tried, he couldn't move it at all. The woman stood by the side expressionlessly, but when she saw that Zhou had used 2 completely different essence energy arts, and they had both reached the calamity grade, she thought to herself, although this person is cunning, his talent is top-notch among humans. Without the help of dimensional powers or fusing with a mutated bloodline, he can actually cultivate 2 essence energy arts at the same time. Furthermore, they have reached the calamity grade. It's indeed rare. It's no wonder the immortal supremacy of the clan named him as a spokesperson. Just as she was thinking about it, she saw Zhou use a completely different essence energy art. Furthermore, it had also reached the calamity grade. Her gaze couldn't help but narrow. He's actually cultivating 3 essence energy arts at the same time, and they have also reached the calamity grade. If such talent can't be used by our immortals, we definitely can't let him leave alive today. The woman didn't have any killing intent, but she did want Zhou to become the spokesperson of the immortals. Zhou used the sky-stealing sun-shifting art again, hoping to see if he could secretly swap out the sword. However, there was still no reaction. This left Zhou somewhat disappointed. He originally wanted to draw the sword and fight the woman again. Even if he couldn't beat her, he could escape with the sword. After all, he couldn't let the sword fall into the hands of the immortals. However, after trying so many essence energy arts, it was useless. It was probably very difficult to pull it out. I'll give it a try again. Zhou planned on giving it a try with the Tao Sutra. If it still didn't work, he could only give up. Although he could still use the human emperor's scripture, it was too obvious. If he used it in front of a woman, she would probably be able to tell that he was the human emperor. If that happened, she might just kill him. Even if he had to fight, Zhou hoped to have the initiative in his hands. Chapter 1728. 4 Essence Energy Arts. The woman couldn't help but be alarmed. To be able to cultivate 4 essence energy arts to such a level was rare even in the dimension. It was unimaginable that a human could cultivate to such a level. A pure-blooded human is actually able to cultivate 4 primordial energy arts to the calamity grade. If he can really take that step in the future, he'll definitely be an extremely terrifying existence. Even in a dimension, he'll probably be a lord. However, the woman thought again. I was overthinking things. How can that step be taken so easily? Ignoring 4 primordial energy arts, even 1 primordial energy art is probably difficult to cultivate to the extreme, much less 4. Although the woman felt that it was impossible for Zhou to take that step to the apocalypse stage, the way she looked at him was somewhat different. Even if such a person can't take that step, he can be considered invincible on Earth. If he can be used by us immortals, who can compete with us for Earth's companion beasts? The woman thought to herself, however, this person can't be left alive no matter what. Even if he can be used by me, I have to eliminate him in the future. It's better to be safe than sorry. If he really takes that step, I'm afraid it'll be difficult to control him. Just as the woman was thinking, she suddenly felt the ground beneath her feet shake. The entire mountain began to shake. He pulled it out. The woman was pleasantly surprised as she saw Zhou slowly pulling out the sword from the stone monument. The sword's blade had already been pulled out, revealing a layer of rust on the sword's body. Not a single ray of light could be seen, but it had a kind of killing intent that made people tremble in fear. No, it shouldn't be called killing intent. To be precise, it was the smell of blood. Just the smell made one's hair stand on end. It was as though one's blood was stirring restlessly, as though it wanted to flow to the sword. It's indeed that sword. Only then did the woman dare to affirm that it was the immortal sword. The sword looked rusty, but the woman knew that it wasn't rust, but blood. The blood of an immortal, the blood of a zenith heaven golden immortal. Back then, the immortal had used this sword to kill countless sky immortals. Even a zenith heaven golden immortal was stained with blood as he was mercilessly slain by the sword. Perhaps only this sword had such a heavy baneful aura in the world. It was a baneful aura nurtured by the blood of countless immortals. There was only one such sword in the world. After Zhou circulated the Tao Sutra, he pulled out the sword. The sword seemed to respond to him, no longer as motionless as before. As his palm slowly left the stone monument, the aura on the sword made Zhou truly feel that it was indeed a sword from the immortal culling sword set. Let me announce that the app I've been using recently supports both Android and iPhone. Although he did not know if it was the immortal extinguishing sword, it had an indescribable resemblance to the immortal slaughtering sword. The sword's shape was completely different, and the aura on the sword was completely different. However, something was the same deep down. How could Zhou, who had been using immortal culling all this time, not sense it? As the sword was pulled out, the entire mountain shook more and more violently. Cracks appeared on the stone tablet one after another. When the sword was completely removed from the stone tablet shattered with a loud bang. Originally, there was only a small patch of grass on the top of the mountain, but now it was growing wildly. In just a moment, the entire mountain was covered in grass, and the grass was growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. "Give me the sword." Upon seeing Zhou pull out the immortal sword, the woman forgot to address herself as her true body. With a flash, she appeared in front of Zhou and reached out to grab the immortal sword in his hand. With the immortal sword in hand, Zhou felt the baneful aura on the sword surge like the sea, like a volcano that was about to erupt. It seemed to contain infinite power. It was a power filled with baneful aura that made Zhou unable to help but feel killing intent. Looking at the woman who was grabbing the immortal sword, Zhou held the sword hilt with both hands and slashed at her. As Zhou brandished the dim sword, it seemed to transform into a sanguine beam that instantly slashed at the woman. "You're courting death," the woman shouted coldly, and her hand erupted with void essence sword chi. The omnipresent sword chi instantly enveloped Zhou and the immortal sword. Zhou ignored the approaching sword beam as he continued slashing at the woman with the immortal sword. At the same time, his body was enveloped by the great Brahma armor. Crack! The immortal sword actually sliced through the void sword chi that could suppress the yin-yang seven-colored divine light. It left a slanted bloody mark on the woman's face that stretched from the left side of her forehead to the right side of her chin. What a powerful sword! Zhou was pleasantly surprised. The sword's strength was stronger than he had imagined. It was clearly a set of swords, but this immortal sword was much stronger than immortal culling. It made Zhou suspect if his immortal culling sword was really one of the 4 immortal vanquishing swords, or if it was just an imitation. In fact, Zhou was overthinking things. The immortal culling sword was naturally not an imitation. The immortal extinguishing sword wasn't stronger than the immortal culling sword either. The reason he felt that the immortal extinguishing sword was strong was because the former owner of the immortal extinguishing sword had killed countless immortals. Even Zenith Heaven Golden immortals had been slain by the sword. The sword had absorbed the blood of countless immortals, and the sanguine aura it formed was too heavy. The restraining effect on immortals was even more direct than the immortal culling sword. As expected of the sword that killed all immortals, it stained with the blood of countless immortals. This sword naturally has an extremely strong restraining effect on immortals. Even a mortal can slice through an immortal body with this sword. Even I'm no exception. The woman stood in the distance and stared at the immortal sword in Zhou hand, but she didn't attack again. I wonder how many years it's been since I've been injured. The woman reached out to touch the sword's scar on her face. She didn't seem angry. Instead, she seemed to be reminiscing about something. From the looks of it, this sword isn't compatible with you. It's best I carry it to prevent you from suffering a bloody calamity. Zhou stared intently at the woman. He wasn't smug because he had injured the woman with one strike. In that situation, the woman had been completely unprepared. She had only reacted at the last moment after the sword beam had been destroyed. Even so, she had been able to dodge the strike that Zhou believed was a sure kill. However, such speed wasn't something Zhou could match. "Do you really think you can injure me with a sword?" The woman looked at Zhou and said indifferently, "You still have a chance now. Hand the sword to me and swear to be the spokesperson of my immortals. I can let bygones be bygones. I'll have to try to know if I can injure you." How could Zhou hand over the immortal sword that he had obtained so easily? Ignoring the fact that Zhou didn't have such plans in the first place, even if he had such plans in the past, he would probably be tempted now that he saw the might of the immortal sword. "I hope you won't regret it." The woman slowly raised her hand as the incorporeal sword aura on her body condensed again. However, the sword aura became fainter and fainter. In the end, he couldn't sense its existence. Zhou heart palpitated as he instinctively summoned the Chaos Egg to protect himself. Chapter 1729. Just as the Chaos Egg wrapped around Zhou body, it suddenly caved in without any warning. It was as though something was squeezing the Chaos Egg from all directions, causing it to constantly distort like a balloon that could explode at any moment. Looking at the essence energy crystals that appeared crazily in the Chaos Egg, Zhou exclaimed inwardly. He couldn't sense the existence of the sword aura at all. If not for his intuition and the Chaos Egg's existence that he had honed after years of life and death, he would probably have been severely injured by the terrifying sword aura. The woman was somewhat surprised when she saw that her incorporeal sword aura couldn't pierce through the Chaos Egg. "Let's see how long you can last." The incorporeal sword aura surged out from the woman's body in a bid to forcefully destroy the Chaos Egg. However, no matter how ferocious her sword aura was, it failed to break through the Chaos Egg's defense. Indeed, Earth hasn't completely broken out of the seal. Her strength has been suppressed to a certain extent. She's still within the calamity grade. Zhou immediately felt relieved when he saw the Chaos Egg block the incorporeal sword aura. "Sir, take your time playing. I won't be accompanying you," Zhou said as he prepared to descend the mountain. "To be able to block the incorporeal sword aura, your powers should belong to Chaos. To be able to cultivate a Chaos Elemental Essence Energy Art to such a stage, and it's a pure defense-type Essence Energy Art, I'm afraid only someone like you who can cultivate multiple Essence Energy Arts at the same time can do it," the woman said as her tone became even more unyielding. As the woman spoke, her tone became even more forceful. She continued, "It's a pity that you're just a catastrophe. The level you've come into contact with is too low. As she spoke, the invisible incorporeal sword aura suddenly changed. It no longer attacked the Chaos Egg directly. Instead, it quickly circled around it. Although the Chaos Egg's defense was astonishing, it didn't have any destructive power. How could it rush out when it was enveloped by the sword aura? Not only was it unable to rush out, but it was even forced to spin by the sword aura. The Chaos Egg's rotation didn't affect Zhou, who was inside, but being trapped here without being able to leave was clearly not good news for him. The level of a calamity is still low. Does that mean you are at the apocalypse stage? However, it looks like the apocalypse stage is only SOSO. So what if you can make me stay here? Zhou probed. The woman said disdainfully, "Chaos is the origin of heaven and earth. It is seamless and without cracks, without beginning and without crack. It is an entity that cannot be cut, and all the techniques in the world cannot break it. If you're facing a mere mortal, it's true that no one would be able to break it. Unfortunately, you're facing me. So what if it's primal chaos first? Let alone your puny primal chaos body, even when the world was in chaos, it would still be broken apart by a supreme power. Today, I'll slash apart the primal chaos with my sword and carry out the matter of splitting the world apart." As soon as he said that, the incorporeal sword chi that carried the Chaos Egg split into two. One wave of sword chi carried the Chaos Egg in a forward direction, while the other wave of sword chi carried the Chaos Egg in a reverse direction. The two waves of sword chi pulled the Chaos Egg in two different directions. Zhou expression changed slightly as he immediately understood what the woman was up to. Chaos One essence was an inseparable entity to begin with, so the Chaos Egg was indestructible. Even if one's strength was stronger than Zhou, it was difficult to forcefully crack it. However, there was no true Chaos One essence in this world. Just like microscopic particles, every time people believed that a particle was the smallest particle that couldn't be cut, with the development of technology, they would realize that it wasn't really the smallest, nor was it truly inseparable. What the woman did was to forcefully add yin and yang to the Chaos Egg. When the Chaos Egg had yin and yang, it was no longer an unbreakable entity. Originally, such a thing was almost impossible, but the woman's incorporeal sword chi also had attributes similar to chaos, making the impossible possible. Of course, the main reason was that the woman's original level was too high. She was at a level far above Zhou's, and her understanding of chaos was far deeper than Zhou's. If Zhou's understanding of chaos could reach the same level as the woman, whether the Chaos Egg would be changed by the incorporeal sword chi would depend on whose strength was stronger. Although Zhou had already realized the problem, it was already a little too late. As the incorporeal sword chi constantly spun in both directions, cracks appeared on the distorted Chaos Egg. The cracks appeared to be strangely symmetrical. They looked extremely beautiful, but to Zhou it was a fatal blow. This was the first time the Chaos Egg had been torn apart head-on. In the past, even if the Chaos Egg exploded, it would have exploded due to overexertion. It had never been torn apart from the outside. Zhou couldn't help but sigh. Knowledge was power. Although their strength was at the Calamity grade, Zhou's main body hadn't reached the Calamity grade. He was slightly weaker in all aspects, but the difference in knowledge wasn't fatal. Seeing more and more cracks appear on the Chaos Egg, Zhou was extremely calm. Battles were always ever-changing. Anything could happen. Although an expert who could control the battle was terrifying, if they didn't have the ability to deal with all kinds of unexpected situations, they ultimately weren't top-notch existences. Although Zhou was far inferior to the woman in terms of knowledge, the art of combat remained the same. The most basic things couldn't be violated. Since my knowledge is inferior to yours, I'll turn your knowledge into mine. Zhou kept his sure domain activated as he analyzed the woman's incorporeal sword chi. If it were any other immortal ability, Sure Yu, who was only at the Hell stage, might not be able to analyze it. However, the incorporeal sword chi was the same as the chaos egg. They were both chaos powers. Furthermore, the woman had just said some crucial information, allowing Zhou Wen to understand the crux of the matter. Shi Yu's speed at analyzing the incorporeal sword chi far exceeded his usual speed. Even if he analyzed the abilities of ordinary calamity-grade creatures, he wouldn't be as fast as he was now. If the woman knew that what she had just said would have such a huge impact on Zhou Wen, she probably wouldn't have said so much nonsense. The power of the incorporeal sword chi was born from the void. Just like chaos, it was a power that existed before the world was formed. Although it was called a sword chi, it could actually take any form. It could be a wall, a shield, or even a palace. As long as the woman needed it, it could change into any shape according to her wishes. Nothingness doesn't mean that there's really nothing. Nothingness itself is a form of existence. As Shi Yu analyzed more and more rules, Zhou Wen's understanding of the incorporeal sword chi deepened. Just a little more. Chaos egg, hold on. Shi Yu had yet to completely analyze the incorporeal sword chi. The nomological chains were incomplete, preventing him from turning them into essence energy art. However, the chaos egg couldn't hold on any longer. Under the incorporeal sword chi, it was forcefully torn to pieces. Zhou Wen's body was instantly exposed. End of this chapter. Chapter 1730. The moment the chaos egg cracked, the killing intent in the woman's eyes intensified. Since Zhou Wen couldn't be used by her, such a human couldn't be allowed to exist in this world. The incorporeal sword aura pressed down on Zhou Wen from all directions, hoping to grind his body to dust. Zhou Wen's eyes were clear as the dark golden wheel of light behind the great Brahma armor shimmered with a dark glow, as though all the light in the world was being sucked in by the wheel of light. Break! The destructive power of great Brahma bloomed with Zhou Wen's fist as it blasted at the woman. Boom! The power of great Brahma struck the incorporeal sword aura and shattered it. Zhou Wen took the opportunity to charge at the woman. A look of surprise flashed in the woman's eyes. Although the incorporeal sword aura wasn't as indestructible as the chaos egg, there weren't many powers that could blast it apart. Under the circumstances of equal strength, there were definitely no more than 10 powers in the dimension that could withstand the incorporeal sword aura. For Zhou Wen's strength to blast apart the incorporeal sword aura meant that the essence energy art he cultivated could enter the top 10 essence energy arts. At the very least, it was comparable. However, this wasn't enough to surprise the woman. What really surprised her was that Zhou Wen had chosen to break through head-on. From the point of view of an ordinary person, the front was where the strength was the strongest. If Zhou Wen only wanted to break through the incorporeal sword aura, he should have attacked the other weak spots. However, the incorporeal sword aura wasn't like that. In fact, the incorporeal sword aura that the woman had placed on the front was the weakest. Zhou Wen had chosen to attack from the front. It was unknown if he had really seen through it or if he was lucky to have attacked the weakest spot. Is it just a coincidence? The killing intent in the woman's heart intensified. The two essence energy arts that Zhou Wen had displayed had characteristics that were extremely rare in the dimension. One was a pure defense of the chaos, while the other had destructive powers. It was somewhat similar to the paramount powers of the Buddha clan, but there were obvious differences. It seemed to be a mutated essence energy art. Furthermore, Zhou Wen had cultivated 4 essence energy arts. Even if the other 2 essence energy arts were inferior to these 2, they were already terrifying enough. The woman moved her hand slightly as the invisible incorporeal sword aura once again crushed at Zhou Wen from all directions. Boom! Zhou Wen had once again shattered the incorporeal sword beam. This time, Zhou Wen chose to attack the incorporeal sword beam from the left. It happened to be the weakest spot of the incorporeal sword beam. It's not a coincidence. A strange glint flashed in the woman's eyes. She condensed the formless sword pressure again to attack Zhou Wen. The outcome was the same. Every time, Zhouwen would choose the weakest spot to break through, making it difficult for her to crush him. "You can actually see the incorporeal sword aura?" the woman said as she stared at Zhouwen. The sword aura on her body continued crushing down on him. "If you can see through my chaos force, why can't I see through your incorporeal sword beam?" Zhouwen broke through the sword beam again and again as he asked. In fact, Zhouwen was in a terrible state. Brahma's destructive power was ultimately slightly weaker than the incorporeal sword beam. Every time he tore through the sword beam, Zhouwen would suffer the impact of the recoil. If his body was also at the heavenly realm, such a recoil wouldn't have been able to injure him. However, he only had a terragrade body. Such a recoil had quite a significant impact on his body. If it wasn't for the fact that the Brahma armor had absorbed and reflected most of the force, his body would have long collapsed. Now, Zhouwen felt as though his organs were about to rupture as blood seeped out of his 7 orifices. Thankfully, with the armor covering his body, the woman couldn't see Zhouwen's situation. "Is that so? Then let me see if you really understand." The incorporeal sword beam on the woman's body suddenly converged, transforming into an invisible sword in her hand. The woman realized that the scattered incorporeal sword beam wasn't enough to kill Zhouwen, but the condensed incorporeal sword beam was enough to easily destroy the destructive power of Brahma. The woman slashed out at an unbelievably fast speed. Zhouwen moved rapidly as he condensed the power of Brahma to strike the incorporeal sword beam. Crack! The power of Brahma, which was like a black hole that could absorb and destroy everything, was sliced apart by the incorporeal sword beam in the woman's hand as though it was tofu. However, Zhouwen also used that instant to dodge the incorporeal sword beam's slash. The woman slashed out 3 times, and Zhouwen dodged her attacks 3 times. Although he was in a sorry state, with him barely dodging each attack, it was enough to shock the woman. "You really do understand," the woman said coldly. The woman said coldly, "But so what if you can understand it? I'll let you know the difference between us." Only then did the woman move. Like a fairy in the wind, she stabbed at Zhouwen. The strike was fast enough. Zhouwen took the opportunity to suddenly pull out his immortal sword and slash at the woman's body. The immortal sword slashed at the invisible sword beam like a sanguine beam, but it brushed past it. The woman's figure was like a veil in the water as she gracefully swept past Zhouwen. The invisible sword beam streaked across Brahma's armor, forcefully slicing through the nearly indestructible dark gold armor. Zhouwen had no choice but to use teleportation on the mountaintop. Only then did he barely manage to dodge the strike before it sliced through his body. On the Brahma armor, there was a crack that spanned across the entire chest. Blood was seeping out of the wound. "You can actually use spatial teleportation on this mountain?" The woman looked at Zhouwen in astonishment. "Why can't I use it?" Zhouwen didn't feel any discomfort. It was probably because of the sure domain's effects that prevented him from being injured by the restrictions on the mountain. "All right," the woman said out of the blue as she slashed at Zhouwen again. Her form was light and ethereal like an immortal. Every strike was like a dance. It didn't look like it had any strength, but Zhouwen knew that any strike was enough to destroy the world. Only in a place like Kunlun Mountain did the restrictions suppress the energy fluctuations. It was as though the fluctuations of the incorporeal sword beam were enough to collapse the mountain. Strike after strike, Zhouwen used the immortal sword in one hand and the power of heaven incinerating in the other to resist the woman's incorporeal sword beam. However, from beginning to end, be it the immortal sword or the power of heaven incinerating, they failed to touch the woman's incorporeal sword beam. The woman seemed to be able to predict the future. Even if Zhouwen used teleportation, she could appear at the spot where he teleported. When Zhouwen teleported out, the incorporeal sword beam was almost stuck to his neck. Zhouwen forcefully reversed the immortal sword in his hand and used the hilt to block the incorporeal sword beam. Only then did he escape the fate of being beheaded. He didn't dare continue teleporting as a bloody mark was left on his neck. The Brahma armor couldn't withstand the terrifying incorporeal sword beam at all. In just a moment, the Brahma armor on Zhou Wen's body was covered in bloody marks as shocking blood seeped out. End of this chapter. Chapter 1731. He couldn't withstand the woman's attacks at all. In Zhou Wen's opinion, the perfect setup and moves were filled with loopholes in front of the woman. It forced Zhou Wen to pay a certain price every time to fend off her attacks. The immortal sword in his hand, that could resist the incorporeal sword aura, failed to touch the woman's incorporeal sword aura. This pressure made Zhou Wen think of the term dimensionality reduction. Many of the woman's means exceeded what Zhou Wen could understand with his knowledge. The woman's previous words were very arrogant, but she did have the right to be arrogant. The difference in knowledge was indeed huge. I can't take it anymore. If this continues, I won't be able to last until Xiu completely analyzes the incorporeal sword aura. Zhou Wen's injuries increased as his heart turned colder. The woman was like an omnipotent god. No matter how Zhou Wen's strength and techniques changed, she seemed to be able to see through everything. Furthermore, she could see through Zhou Wen's painstaking setup. Just as Zhou Wen was about to be struck by the incorporeal sword aura again, his figure suddenly vanished and he appeared on the other side of the mountaintop. The woman was slightly taken aback. This time, she didn't immediately predict where Zhou Wen would appear, nor did she immediately attack. 5 Elemental Fusion Escape Technique? The woman frowned slightly as she looked at Chao Guo, who was lying on Zhou Wen's shoulder. Zhou Wen secretly lamented that it was a close shave. If he hadn't dodged the strike, one of his arms would have been severed. Now, Zhou Wen was secretly glad that he had brought Chao Guo over. It was Chao Guo who had used an escape technique to help him escape the strike. When the woman attacked again, Zhou Wen could only continue fighting with his life on the line. Chao Guo would occasionally use an escape technique to help him escape, but it was only once in a while. It didn't help Zhou Wen escape every time. Zhou Wen understood why Chao Guo didn't constantly use an escape technique to help him. It wasn't that he wasn't willing, nor was it that he wasn't strong enough. The real reason was the woman. This was because after Chao Guo used an escape technique to help Zhou Wen escape a few times, the woman's prediction of where Zhou Wen would appear was getting closer and closer. It was only a matter of time before she could accurately predict the distance. Furthermore, it wouldn't take too long. Not many people in the dimension know an escape technique that combines the 5 elements. However, in front of me, it's just a trivial matter, the woman said as she slashed out. Zhou Wen, who had just escaped, dodged in a sorry state. His chest was left with a deep gash. Zhou Wen knew that the woman had completely seen through Strawberry Doll's escape technique. If Strawberry Doll were to use an escape technique to help him, he would probably be killed the moment he escaped. I can't hide anymore. Zhou Wen stopped moving quickly. His aura was heavy as he stared intently at the woman's feet. Although there were many variations in her sword techniques, be it thrusts, slashes, or slashes, they ultimately attacked Zhou Wen. What was truly unpredictable was the woman's movement technique. As long as he could predict the woman's movement trajectory, it would be much easier to use the immortal sword to block the formless sword chi. After suffering so many strikes and watching for so long, Zhou Wen had a general idea of the woman's movement technique. However, he wasn't sure if he could withstand it. Giving up so soon? The woman said coldly, but she didn't stop at all. Her graceful figure instantly appeared in front of Zhou Wen as she slashed at him with the incorporeal sword beam. Zhou Wen didn't retreat. As though he had found an opportunity, he suddenly slashed out with the immortal sword in his right hand. It's over. How can you predict an immortal's technique? Amidst the woman's mockery, the immortal sword missed. The incorporeal sword beam slashed at Zhou Wen's neck from the other side. The woman believed that she could definitely kill Zhou Wen this time. At such a close distance, Even an escape technique wouldn't be able to help Zhou escape in time. Furthermore, without the immortal sword in her other hand, she couldn't block the incorporeal sword beam's full-powered slash with Brahma's power. Kacha! The sound of shattering glass sounded beside Zhou. The immortal culling sword appeared in Zhou left hand. The blade blocked his neck and forcefully severed the incorporeal sword beam. This sword. So you are the human sovereign. The woman immediately recognized the immortal culling sword at a glance. I wouldn't dare call myself the human sovereign. I'm just one of the many living beings. Zhou held the immortal sword in one hand and the immortal culling sword in the other as he stared intently at the woman's footsteps. That's good. It's time for me to rid the immortals of this calamity. The woman moved again, fluttering like an immortal. It was impossible to tell where she was going, but the incorporeal sword beam had already arrived in front of Zhou. The incorporeal sword beam was formless to begin with. Coupled with such an unpredictable movement technique, an ordinary calamity grade wouldn't even be able to see the sword beam, much less block it. However, Zhou only had one thought left in his mind. No matter what, he had to block the incorporeal sword beam. He had no other choice but to believe in his own analysis and judgment. Clang! The immortal culling sword slashed through empty air, but the immortal sword struck the incorporeal sword beam once again, resolving a fatal crisis. The woman frowned slightly. This was the second time Zhou had blocked her attack. Zhou still couldn't completely predict her actions, so he made two preparations every time. The sword in one hand was both a prediction and a form of sealing. If he could predict correctly, he would naturally be able to block the incorporeal sword beam. If he couldn't predict correctly, he could seal off an area, reducing the area that the woman could attack. This made it much easier to predict. This method wasn't considered smart, but without powerful calculations and the ability to multitask, it was impossible no matter what. The woman didn't seem to believe that Zhou could really block her attacks as she attacked again and again. Zhou two swords worked together as he blocked the woman's attacks again and again. Although there were times when he made a wrong judgment and was injured by the woman, the injuries weren't fatal. In fact, this was also deliberate on Zhou's part. When he couldn't make a confident judgment, he would selectively seal off some fatal areas, preventing the incorporeal sword beam from killing him directly. As expected of the strongest human. You do have some ability, but the technique of multitasking is too common among immortals. As the woman spoke, she condensed an incorporeal sword beam in her other hand. She planned on using two swords to crack Zhou's two swords. It's too late. Zhou looked at the woman as a smile surfaced on his lips. If the woman had used two swords from the beginning, it wouldn't have been difficult for her to crack his two swords, but it was different now. After so many battles, Zhou was already completely familiar with the woman's actions. Just as the woman had said, there was no true chaos essence in the world, so there was no true indefinite form. Everyone, even immortals, had their own patterns of behavior. However, the woman's movement technique was ever-changing. It looked like there was no pattern to it, but it didn't mean that there was none. End of this chapter. Chapter 1732. What's too late? The woman didn't immediately attack as she looked at Zhou and asked, "Your sword beams can't hurt me anymore." Zhou's emotions eased as his body seemed to relax. The two swords in his hands casually hung to the ground. "It's good to have confidence, but blind confidence will kill you," the woman said indifferently. She didn't take Zhou's words to heart at all. She even treated it as a joke. Previously, Zhou had been able to block her attack because he had used the two immortal swords to restrain immortals. He had to sacrifice his body's pain to barely survive. Now that Zhou said that her sword couldn't hurt him again, the woman naturally didn't believe him. "Haven't you always wanted my life? What about now?" Zhou asked. "All right." The woman said yes before brandishing her swords without a word. With both swords moving at the same time, even if Zhou Wen could block one of the incorporeal sword beams, the other incorporeal sword beams would definitely be able to kill him. Clang! However, the sound of two sword beams being sliced entered her ears. The two immortal swords in Zhou Wen's hands had accurately slashed at an incorporeal sword beam, slicing it apart. Impossible! The woman didn't believe such a thing as she condensed her sword beams to attack Zhou Wen again. She didn't believe that a calamity grade like Zhou Wen could see through her sword techniques. Although her strength was only at the calamity grade, her consciousness and realm were at the apocalypse grade. It was impossible for a calamity grade to see through her sword technique. However, the following battle forced the woman to recognize reality. Her sword techniques had really been seen through, or rather, her movement techniques had been seen through. No matter how the woman's movement techniques and sword techniques changed, the two swords in Zhou Wen's hands could accurately find the two incorporeal sword beams. Instantly, the two of them exchanged more than 10,000 strikes, but the incorporeal sword beams in the woman's hands failed to injure Zhou Wen. What's going on with this human? The way the woman looked at Zhou Wen changed. She found it unbelievable that a human could have such terrifying combat strength and talent. I told you that your sword beam can't injure me anymore. Zhou Wen's mind turned calm. The difference in levels was just a difference in knowledge. It was just like how people in ancient times only knew how to use swords and knives. They had never seen modern firearms and guns. When using swords and knives against guns, they would naturally be at a disadvantage. However, when the ancient people learned how to use the spear, they might not be worse than the people in the real world. They might even be better. The gap in knowledge was sometimes the easiest to bridge. While the woman was reducing Zhou Wen's dimensions, she also allowed him to quickly absorb knowledge that he couldn't have come into contact with. It would have been fine if it were any ordinary person, but Zhou Wen happened to be someone who had a strong learning ability and dared to try. At the top of the mountain, the sound of swords clashing could be heard. Not only could Zhou Wen block the woman's attacks, but he could even occasionally counterattack. You are indeed very strong and worthy of the title of human sovereign. Unfortunately, you were born in the wrong place. The woman sighed as though she was feeling sorry for Zhou Wen. What do you mean? Zhou Wen asked in puzzlement. If you were born in a large clan in a dimension with such talent, you would definitely be the lord of a region and achieve supreme feat. Unfortunately, you were born among humans. Now, you are only at the calamity grade. If you want to advance to the apocalypse, I'm afraid you still need a long way to go, but you don't have the time, the woman said with a look of pity. So what? I'm still young. I have plenty of time. I can afford to wait, Zhou Wen said. No, you can't afford to wait because you have to die here today. Although I'm beginning to admire you, you can't be used by me. I can't allow you to live in this world. Otherwise, you will definitely be a huge problem for my immortals in the future. The woman spoke sincerely. She admitted Zhou Wen's talent and abilities. Even she was very afraid of him. Should I thank you for your praise, or should I hate you for wanting to kill me? Zhou Wen said with a twitch of his lips. There's no need for either. Death is like an extinguished lamp. Apart from life, everything else is illusory and unrealistic. It's like the Buddha race's cultivation of reincarnation is just a lie to themselves. You don't need to thank me, nor do you need to hate me. Just do your best to live one more minute, one more second. Even if it's one more instant, it's good. The woman paused for a moment before saying, A person like you shouldn't die like this, but you're just a human. Tell me, do you have any unfulfilled wishes? Perhaps I can help you fulfill them. You make it sound like I'm doomed. Zhou Wen wasn't angry. As he spoke, he fought the woman. He wanted to understand more about the woman's movement techniques, sword techniques, and incorporeal sword chi. Yes, I've already decided to kill you, so you will definitely die. The woman suddenly retreated and stood there looking at Zhou Wen. She said with a serious expression, Tell me your last wish. I don't have any last wishes, Nor do I need to. If you need it, you can tell me your last wish, Zhouwen said indifferently. What a pity. The woman sighed softly and stopped looking at Zhouwen. She didn't even look at him. All she did was look up at Kunlun's dome. The sky above Kunlun Mountain looked no different from the sky outside. It was the scorching sun in the sky. However, this sky wasn't the same sky. Kunlun Mountain itself was a tiny world. Even if one had the ability to fly, they couldn't rush to the outside world from Kunlun Mountain's sky. Sword intent surged from the woman's body as it shot into the sky like a heaven-piercing blade. The sky of the entire Kunlun Mountain suddenly changed color. The sunny sky with the scorching sun in the sky suddenly became overcast with dark clouds. Furthermore, there was a faint light brewing in the dark clouds, as if endless thunder and lightning were gathering. Zhouwen's expression changed drastically. From the woman's stance, she was probably going to forcefully break through the restrictions in Kunlun Mountain and use the power of the apocalypse. Zhouwen had never seen how terrifying the power of the apocalypse was, but he knew that it was definitely an overwhelming power. The immortal culling sword and immortal sword slashed at the woman crazily, but the woman stood there without any intention of dodging. She allowed the two swords that could restrain immortals to slash at her body. However, the immortal sword that could even slice through the incorporeal sword chi seemed to have slashed at an invisible steel wall. It stopped 3 feet away from the woman. No matter how much strength Zhouwen exerted or how crazily he slashed, he couldn't advance an inch. The two swords slashed down like a storm, but the woman didn't even look at them. Everything under the apocalypse is an illusion. It's just an empty dream. The woman retracted her gaze from the sky and slowly looked at Zhouwen. End of chapter. Chapter 1733. Is the power of the apocalypse really that invincible? Zhouwen was alarmed. The immortal culling sword and the immortal sword had the effect of restraining immortals. Coupled with his full-powered attack, he couldn't even get within 3 feet of the woman. Escape. This was the only thought left in Zhouwen's mind. He ignored everything and rushed down the mountain, but his body seemed to sink into the void. He found it difficult to exert any strength. The feeling was extremely strange. It was as though everything around him had turned into a void. There was nowhere for him to borrow strength, and with nowhere to borrow strength, he naturally couldn't move. No, it should be said that it was a state even more terrifying than a void. Even he himself seemed to have become an illusory existence. Everything in the apocalypse will return to nothingness. To be able to die under the power of the void tribulation, you can be considered the first human in this world. There shouldn't be any regrets. The woman looked at Zhouwen like a god. Although they were standing at almost the same height, the woman had the aura of looking down on Zhouwen. The void tribulation? Zhouwen stared at the woman without a word as he looked at the lightning that was brewing in the sky from the corner of his eye. He knew that the woman definitely couldn't maintain such strength for long. Using the power of the apocalypse in Earth's Kunlun Mountain would definitely put her under immense pressure. If too much time passed, even if Zhouwen didn't take action, the woman would be destroyed by the power of the restrictions. The problem was if he could last that long. The power of the apocalypse tribulation was already difficult for him to resist. He continuously switched to several essence energy arts, but he was unable to escape the restraints of the void power. The face of Chaoguo, who was sprawled on Zhouwen's body, turned red as though he was trying his best to use an escape technique. However, just like Zhouwen, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't escape, much less escape with Zhouwen. Earth's restrictions are more powerful than I imagined. From the looks of it, I don't have much time left. It's time to end this. The woman looked at the lightning in the sky and couldn't help but frown. It's time to send you on your way. The woman looked at Zhouwen and was about to kill him when she suddenly heard the cry of a phoenix coming from the side of the mountain. The phoenix that had been repelled by the woman flew up the mountainside like a rainbow. Instantly, it reached the mountaintop and charged at Zhou, who was standing there immobile. The woman didn't stop the phoenix when she saw it charge at Zhou, as though she had the intention of finishing it off. The phoenix on the mountain isn't dead? What was it trying to do? Several thoughts flashed through Zhou's mind. Before Zhou could figure it out, the phoenix had already rushed in front of him. However, its target wasn't him, but the immortal sword in his hand. You still want to snatch the immortal sword at this time? Even if you snatch the immortal sword, will that woman let you off? Zhou imagined that the phoenix wanted to snatch the sword. However, what happened next left Zhou somewhat alarmed. The phoenix slammed into the immortal sword, and its entire body seemed to melt as it rushed into the immortal sword. Because of the integration of the phoenix, the originally blood-stained immortal sword immediately released 7-colored light. When the phoenix completely integrated into the immortal sword, the 7-colored divine light on the immortal sword blossomed like a 7-colored sword sun. So that's how it is. No wonder I have never seen the sword light of this sword before. It turns out the sword light of the immortal sword has transformed into a phoenix. Seeing that, the woman was not shocked. Instead, she was overjoyed. Even if the immortal sword had a sword light, it was useless. The owner of the immortal sword was no longer the immortal who had slain all the immortals. A calamity grade holding an immortal sword with a sword light wouldn't be able to unleash too much strength. This way, it would benefit the woman. Snatching a complete immortal sword was naturally more valuable than an immortal sword without a sword light. Just as the woman was rejoicing, she heard a strange cry. In the distant sea of clouds, a strange white bird rushed towards the mountain. When the woman saw the strange bird, she was slightly surprised. She didn't recognize what the strange white bird was. Zhou was taken aback when he saw the strange white bird. It was clearly the phoenix he had encountered in Kunlun Mountain's garden. However, it was still in the form of a white chick. As the white bird rushed towards the mountain, the white feathers on its body gradually turned into a rainbow. Its body was rapidly transforming into a phoenix's form. It's actually a phoenix? The woman was somewhat surprised as she carefully sized up the white bird that was transforming into a phoenix. As though she had noticed something, she muttered to herself, "This is a little strange. This phoenix seems to be somewhat similar to the phoenix formed by the immortal sword's sword beam, but it's also somewhat different. It's not formed purely from sword beams." As the woman pondered, the white bird had completely transformed into the form of a rainbow phoenix. It charged towards Zhou like the previous phoenix. Don't tell me it wants to charge into the immortal sword as well? Zhou was secretly delighted. Now, having more strength meant more hope. Although he didn't know if he could resist the power of the apocalypse, it was better to have more help. To his surprise, the phoenix didn't charge towards the immortal sword. Instead, it charged towards Zhou and slammed into his chest. The rainbow light imprinted itself on Zhou's chest like a colorful phoenix tattoo. At the same time, Zhou felt a force surge into his body, instantly filling his entire body. Even the dark golden great heaven incinerating armor turned colorful. I see. The woman seemed to be enlightened as a sneer suffused the corner of her lips. Fengxian, oh Fengxian. So you have long perished. Even your sword intent has turned into a mortal object. All right, I'll destroy your will today and snatch your sword. From then on, the immortals will return to the world and obtain the eternal achievement. After the phoenix fused into Zhou's body, not only did he feel his body fill with sword intent as though it was about to explode, but he also felt an indescribable connection form between him and the immortal sword. Although he had previously held the immortal sword and could borrow its power, it was ultimately a relationship between a human and a tool. Now, he felt as though he was connected to the immortal sword by blood. With the augmentation of the two phoenixes and Zhou's own strength, he seemed to loosen up a little under the power of the apocalypse. His body regained some mobility. Without any hesitation, the immortal sword in his hand that emitted a rainbow glow stabbed at the woman in front of him. Zhou Wen's entire body seemed to fuse with the immortal sword as he transformed into a rainbow beam of light that charged at the woman. The sword beam tore through the illusory power of the apocalypse and penetrated the woman's chest. The peerless sword beam tore through the layers of illusory power and arrived in front of the woman. Just as it was about to pierce through her chest, it suddenly stopped moving. The woman raised her right hand in front of her chest. Her index and middle fingers clamped down on the blade of the immortal sword, preventing it from advancing an inch. End of this chapter. Chapter 1734. So what if you have Phoenix Immortal's sword and sword intent? You are ultimately not Phoenix Immortal. Without the Phoenix Tribulation, you are still immortal. Even if you can't fully unleash the power of the Void Tribulation, killing you is still a piece of cake. The woman held the sword in one hand as she raised her other hand to strike Zhou Wen's head. The suppression of the world became stronger. If this continued, her body probably wouldn't be able to withstand it. Zhou Wen was alarmed. Such a powerful force had been easily resolved by the woman. The difference between the Calamity grade and the Apocalypse grade was greater than Zhou Wen had imagined. At that moment, it was impossible for him to escape. Against the woman's palm strike that contained the power of the Apocalypse, Zhou Wen seemed to have no chance. Suddenly, the woman's body paused. Her palm that was striking at Zhou Wen also paused. Teacher! Zhou Wen immediately understood something as he frantically circulated the power in his body and continued thrusting the immortal sword at the woman. Zhou Wen had always guessed that Wang Mingyuan wasn't really dead. Back when he killed the White Dragon under Dragon Gate Grotto, the White Dragon had once existed in a state that humans couldn't see. Furthermore, it had an extremely terrifying power of death. Back then, Zhou Wen had suspected that Wang Mingyuan had obtained the same power. However, it was only a suspicion. Now that he saw the woman's body change, he immediately confirmed his previous guess. The woman's body was affected. Her fingers that were holding the immortal sword relaxed for a moment. The immortal sword passed through her fingers and stabbed straight at her chest. Her clothes tore apart as the tip of the sword stabbed into her flesh. The rainbow-colored sword beam stabbed inwards in a frenzy, attempting to penetrate her body. However, the sword beam was instantly restrained by the power of the Void Tribulation. The immortal sword that had just stabbed into the tip couldn't continue advancing as blood flowed down the sword. No matter how hard Zhou Wen tried, the immortal sword seemed to be rooted to the ground, unable to move at all. Wang Mingyuan, you sure are capable and scheming. You actually managed to fool my eyes. Unfortunately, you have underestimated the power of an apocalypse. No matter how much you scheme, in front of absolute power, you are just a clown. As the woman spoke, she slowly raised her left hand again and slapped it at Zhou Wen in front of her. It could be seen that Wang Mingyuan still had a certain influence on women's bodies, but this influence was rapidly weakening. If it wasn't for Wang Mingyuan's current strange state and the fact that he was attached to the woman's body, the woman would have killed Wang Mingyuan with a slap. However, it was only a matter of time. After finishing off Zhou Wen and the immortal sword, even if Wang Mingyuan possessed the woman's body, he would ultimately die. Just as the woman's palm was about to strike Zhou Wen's head and the power of the Void Tribulation was about to bring Zhou Wen a calamity, a look of delight flashed in Zhou Wen's eyes. Shi Yu's analysis was finally completed. It turned into strange text that formed an Void Sword Sutra Primordial Energy Art. Almost at the same time, Shi Yu advanced from Hell rank to Heaven rank. Zhou Wen desperately released the power of his teacher domain. At the same time, he threw away the immortal culling sword in his other hand and held it with both hands as he pushed it forward with all his might. The nomological powers that Shi Yu had analyzed could be completely shielded, but that was only against powers at or below the calamity level. Zhou Wen didn't know how effective Shi Yu was against powers at the apocalypse level. However, He didn't have the time to consider so much. In this situation, it was either he or she would die. All he could do was give it a try. Although the power of the immortal sword had loosened the power of the void tribulation, it still gave Zhou immense pressure, greatly reducing the strength he could produce. The moment Shi Yu's power appeared, Zhou immediately felt his body sink. The feeling of having nowhere to borrow strength completely vanished as he was immediately overjoyed. The woman, who was already confident of victory, was about to kill Zhou with her palm when she suddenly felt an intense pain in her chest. The immortal sword had pierced through her chest, and the rainbow-colored sword beam penetrated her body, causing rainbow-colored lines to appear on her body. It was like a painting that had been torn apart and then glued back together, leaving behind fine lines. The woman's palm struck Zhou head almost at the same time, sending him flying. Brahma's helmet caved in as he fell to the ground and rolled far away, nearly falling off the mountain. No. Impossible! The woman looked down at the immortal sword that had pierced through her chest, her face filled with disbelief. "I'll be taking your life." A faint voice sounded from the woman. It was cold and emotionless. It was none other than Wang Mingyuan's voice. "Wang Mingyuan, don't be happy too early. This is only an avatar of my true body. Even if you kill an avatar, you won't obtain any substantial benefit. And the moment you return to the dimension will be the moment you die." The woman's body was disintegrated by the power of the immortal sword. Without the support of her body, the power of the void tribulation rapidly dissipated. The terrifying lightning in the sky also gradually receded. "I don't need any substantial benefits. I only need your experience and knowledge. Perhaps to you immortals, strength is paramount, but to humans, knowledge is the greatest strength. That's enough for me." Wang Mingyuan's voice sounded again. "Besides, this is Earth, Kunlun Mountain. Even if you are an immortal supremacy's avatar, you won't be able to contact her, right? So it was your plan to take the immortal sword from the beginning. You wanted to kill me from the beginning." The woman's voice was filled with anger. She wished she could slap Wang Mingyuan into minced meat. However, she forcefully used her strength, causing the lines on her body to crack open. Blood instantly dyed her clothes red, making her look like she had just been scooped out of a pool of blood. "Sigh, why torture yourself? Phoenix Fairy's sword has slain all immortals. Having her heart pierced by this sword and stained with blood, you no longer have any chance," Wang Mingyuan said with a sigh. The woman was so angry that she wanted to say something, but when she opened her mouth, blood spewed out. 7-colored light seeped out of her mouth as her entire body cracked apart amidst the 7-colored light. "If it wasn't for Earth's power suppression, how could you injure me? And that person. The woman looked at Zhou and said in a muffled voice. Before she could finish her sentence, her body had completely collapsed, turning into a pile of flesh and broken bones. A ghost-like figure of light walked out of the woman's shattered body. Then, Wang Mingyuan's corpse, which had been abandoned by Zhou, flew towards the figure of light and turned into icy jade-like crystals. Soon, they condensed back into Wang Mingyuan's body. "Little one, your growth has far exceeded my expectations." Wang Mingyuan smiled at Zhou. Chapter 1735. "Teacher, are you still you?" Zhou looked into Wang Mingyuan's eyes and slowly asked. "What am I?" Wang Mingyuan picked up the sword on the ground and handed it to Zhou. He continued, "In different environments there will be different versions of me. I was born in an isolated mountain village. I was a villager. In school I was a student. In the army I was a soldier. After becoming a commanding officer, I became a leader. All of these can be me, but the content and views of every period are different. It can also be said that every period is no longer the same me of the past." "What are you now?" Zhou asked as he took the sword. Up to now, Zhou still remembered the question Wang Mingyuan had asked him and his student. Zhou already knew Wang Mingyuan's choice, But just as Wang Mingyuan had said, different environments led to different ways of thinking. Was the current Wang Mingyuan still the same Wang Mingyuan? Zhou couldn't be sure. He felt that he understood Wang Mingyuan less and less. I'm me. At least, nothing can change me now, Wang Mingyuan said with a smile. Then I'm relieved. Zhou nodded. I'll wait for you at the Immortals. Wang Mingyuan looked at Zhou, his eyes somewhat glazed over. It was unknown what he was thinking. I've already decided not to become the spokesperson of the Immortals, Zhou said. Wang Mingyuan only smiled and said, That's not important. I'll wait for you. With that said, Wang Mingyuan didn't wait for Zhou to say anything else as he went down the mountain. Zhou looked at Wang Mingyuan's back and seemed to have many things to say, but he didn't seem to have anything to say. He opened his mouth but didn't say anything. All he did was watch Wang Mingyuan disappear at the foot of the mountain. I hope Earth breaks out of the seal a little slower. Zhou had already deeply felt the power of an apocalypse. It was just a doppelganger of an apocalyptic elite, but the power it could unleash was enough to kill him. Moreover, it was under the suppression of Earth's power, so the doppelganger couldn't truly unleash the full power of the apocalypse. Zhou found it unbelievable. If Earth completely broke out of the seal and a true apocalypse expert descended, what kind of disaster would it be? Before the Earth's seal was completely broken, they had to obtain a power that could contend against the doomsday level no matter what. Otherwise, it would be a catastrophe. I have to quickly advance to the calamity grade. Zhou sheathed the immortal culling sword. Just as he was thinking about where to put the immortal sword, it flew towards the scabbard of the immortal culling sword. The scabbard of the culling immortal sword could only accommodate the immortal culling sword. There was no extra space, but when the immortal sword flew over, it strangely inserted itself into the scabbard, sticking tightly to the culling immortal sword. When the celestial sword returned to its scabbard, the sword hilt seemed to undergo a strange change. Two ancient characters appeared on the sword hilt, celestial end. It's indeed the immortal extinguishing sword. Zhou had long guessed it, but he was still somewhat delighted when he saw the name. The immortal vanquishing sword and immortal culling sword had a powerful restraining effect on immortals. And now, the strongest race in the dimension was the immortals. In the future, if he could find the immortal vanquishing sword and immortal trapping sword and use the four swords together, he might be able to resist them even if he couldn't reach the apocalypse stage. I wonder where the other two immortal swords are. Zhou also knew that it was too difficult to gather all four immortal swords. Unwilling to stay on Kunlun Mountain any longer, Zhou packed his things and went down the mountain. He met Lu Yun at the door. Lu Yun didn't seem to know anything as he asked Zhou if he had obtained the immortal sword. Didn't you see teacher? Zhou asked in puzzlement. If Lu Yun saw Wang Mingyuan, he probably wouldn't ask such a question. No. Lu Yun shook his head. I got it. Let's head back first. With an apocalypse stage avatar destroyed here, Zhou didn't know if the immortals would send anyone over. It was better to leave as soon as possible. It's good that you got it. I still have something on, so I won't be returning with you. Lu Yun heaved a sigh of relief and waved his hand to bid Zhou farewell. Zhou wasn't in the mood to keep him as he returned to guide Ancient City alone. After returning to the Ancient City, Zhou got Li Xian to help him investigate dimensional zones, hoping to find one that matched the Godfiend era. As for himself, he studied the Kunlun Mountain dimensional zone. He entered the strange stone chamber through the familiar door, but he didn't see the metal artifact or the white bird. Instead, there were quite a number of grass fruit dolls in the garden. Speaking of the grass fruit dolls, the one that followed Zhou followed him all the way back to guide Ancient City. It stayed by Zhou's side all day without any intention of leaving. He attempted to enter the garden to pluck the grass fruit dolls, but they grew on the vines and couldn't escape easily. It was very easy for Zhou to pluck them. However, before he could think of a way to deal with the grass fruit dolls in his hand, he suddenly felt the entire garden shake. Roots that resembled true dragons drilled out of the ground with a demonic glow as they swept towards the blood-colored avatar. Zhouwen condensed the power of Brahma and struck a dragon-like root, forcefully snapping it. However, the roots blotted out the sky and enveloped him from all directions, preventing him from teleporting. The power of Brahma crazily struck and tore through layers of roots, but the roots seemed endless. In the end, he was trapped within and could only use the Chaos Egg to defend himself. The roots wrapped around the Chaos Egg in layers, preventing it from exploding. Zhouwen was just about to carefully observe the roots when he realized that the Chaos Egg was shrinking. Soon, Zhouwen realized that after the roots wrapped around the Chaos Egg, many tiny roots attached themselves to it. It was as though they had taken root in the ground and were absorbing the Chaos Egg's power. Not only did the Chaos Egg not produce essence energy crystals, but it also allowed the roots to absorb quite a bit of energy. The Chaos Egg's strength was becoming weaker and weaker. What the hell is this? It can actually restrain the Chaos Egg? Why didn't I see it when I entered the garden in real life? Zhouwen ignored the Chaos Egg and scanned the source of the root. However, he couldn't see the source of the roots within his perception range. The roots drilled out from underground, and he didn't know if they came from the same plant. Not long after, the Chaos Egg was sucked dry. The blood-colored avatar's body was also exposed and bound by the roots. The roots were like blood-sucking leeches as they sucked the great Brahma armor and the blood-colored avatar's body dry. The game screen went black. This thing is at the apocalypse stage, right? Zhouwen was alarmed and puzzled. End of chapter. Chapter 1736. After dripping his blood to revive, he entered the garden again. After a few probes, Zhouwen realized that as long as he didn't touch the flowers and plants in the garden, the strange roots wouldn't appear. As long as the plants were injured, the roots would immediately appear. What was even more terrifying was that there were unimaginable numbers of roots. No matter how many roots Zhouwen severed, he would only be trapped by them. Furthermore, they could absorb any energy. As long as he was trapped, it was equivalent to death. No defensive skills could withstand it. Zhouwen temporarily gave up on the idea of obtaining benefits from the garden and went to the huge canyon in Kunlun Mountain. There were many spores in the canyon. These things were most suitable for Tai Sui and Primordial Spore to grow. However, he didn't know if Primordial Spore's level was too low. After releasing Tai Sui and Primordial Spore, Tai Sui immediately pounced towards the spot with the most spores like a glutton that had seen a feast. Primordial Spore wasn't that anxious. It circled the blood-colored avatar for a while before flying towards a fist-sized red fungus and burrowing into it. Sui and Professor Gu were doing a show, but this time, the show wasn't a battle scene, but a countdown on the Rubik's Cube. The Big Dipper dimensional zone had already entered its countdown. There was less than an hour left. Professor Gu, there's less than 50 minutes left. Up to now, no one has challenged the Polaris Palace. Human Emperor's first place might very well last until the end, Sui said excitedly. Don't. Beauty Sue, don't ask Sect Master that. If he were to say something else, Human Emperor would be in danger. The bullet screen was filled with wails. Sect Master, please don't milk Human Emperor. Beauty Sue, you're trying to kill my Human Emperor. What kind of grudge is this? Professor Gu's face darkened as he looked at the screen full of requests for milk. He cleared his throat and said, among the current spokespersons, the strongest are Mauve and Koloman. However, their strength isn't enough to break through the hidden Polaris Palace dimensional zone. Unless a new expert appears, Human Emperor's first place should still be stable. When Professor Gu said this, his heart was also beating like a drum. Human Emperor, you have to be steady. Whether we can wash away the reputation of being a toxic healer depends on you. Professor Gu had flipped over so many times before, but Human Emperor was the only one who could not die no matter how much he healed him. He had never dropped the ball before. Now, he finally understood. He grabbed onto Human Emperor and desperately healed him. He wanted to rely on Human Emperor to turn the tables. Of course, calling it milk was also a normal analysis. The more Professor Gu said this, the more flustered the people watching the show became. Many people who hoped that Human Emperor could win first place now understood in their hearts. Time ticked by. In the last 10 minutes, no one had entered the Rubik's Cube. It seems that the first place of Ren Huang is secured. Professor Gu secretly breathed a sigh of relief and said such a sentence. But just as he finished speaking, the Rubik's Cube screen suddenly changed. Someone had entered the Big Dipper Palace to issue a challenge. It's over, it's over. The sect leader has shown his might. Our Human Emperor is in danger. F*CK, the sect master's desire to destroy the Human Emperor has yet to die. Who the hell is challenging at this time? I'm so flustered. Professor Gu's heart also skipped a beat. He quickly took a closer look and found that the person who had entered the Big Dipper Palace was Mo He, who was currently in third place. Although Mo He is very strong, it should still be a little difficult for him to challenge the hidden North Star Palace. After all, before this, he had not even passed the Army Destroyer Palace, Professor Gu quickly said when he saw that it was Mo He. Sect leader, please stop talking. The bullet screen was filled with pleas for him to let go. Why is Mo He challenging again at this time? Does he have the confidence to break the hidden North Star Palace? Su Yi was also nervous. Although Mo He was also considered a human powerhouse, Su Yi still hoped that Human Emperor could win first place. After Mo He entered the North Star Palace, he did not hesitate and directly killed his way through one star palace after another. It seemed that he really intended to go to the hidden North Star Palace. Everyone's hearts were in their mouths. After a while, they saw Mo He rush into the Army Destroyer Palace. Moreover, the stairs in front of the Star Palace that could eliminate vitality did not have any effect on him. After Mo He defeated the Army Destroyer Star Lord, as everyone had expected, he learned from Human Emperor's method and activated the teleportation array to the North Star Palace. Oh my god, Mo He is really going to fight the Purple Star Lord. Professor Gu's mouth is really blessed. Whatever he says, it will come true. Human Emperor's first place is in danger. Mo He must have come prepared. A powerhouse like him would not be so impulsive as to throw away his life. It can't be, right? Professor Gu had an urge to cry. Right now, he was more nervous than anyone else. He pretended to be calm on the surface, but in his heart, he was desperately shouting, "Please don't. You must hold on." Just as everyone was guessing how Mo He would defeat the Purple Star Lord, they were stunned when they saw the scene in the North Star Palace. The North Star Palace was still the same North Star Palace, but there was no Purple Star Lord inside. It was actually an empty Star Palace. How can this be? Everyone, including Mo He and Professor Gu, was taken aback. Su Yi's reaction was very fast. He immediately thought of a possibility and said excitedly, "I know. The hidden North Star Palace is different from ordinary star palaces. The Star Lord in this Star Palace will only appear once. Only the first person to defeat him will be able to obtain the benefit." That's right, that's it. Professor Gu also slapped his thigh excitedly. There's only one Purple Star Lord, which means that the first person to defeat him will definitely be ranked first. Human Emperor is really in the bag this time. Mo He searched around the Star Palace, but he could not find the Purple Star Lord. He understood what had happened, and he felt very depressed. It wasn't easy for him to think of a way to defeat the Purple Star Lord. He had even spent a lot of money to borrow many powerful companion beasts, but he never expected such an outcome. Although he was indignant, there was nothing he could do. In the end, he could only leave the Star Palace. After Mo He left, the Rubik's Cube's countdown had already passed. Then, the Rubik's Cube's image turned into a starry sky. In the Star Palace, one could see the Big Dipper emitting light one after another. Furthermore, the light was extraordinary, so bright that it made one's heart tremble. Boom! The first star of the Big Dipper exploded. The dazzling light penetrated the Rubik's Cube screen, blinding everyone's eyes. Following that, the Big Dipper exploded one after another. Finally, the North Star emitted its final radiance, drowning the entire screen in the explosion of light. End of this chapter. Chapter 1737. When the Rubik's Cube's screen dimmed again, the screen had already turned into the Rubik's Cube ranking. Under everyone's watchful eyes, the last name on the Rubik's Cube ranking turned into specks of light and dissipated. Then, from bottom to top, the names shattered and vanished. Moments later, there was only one name left on the ranking, Human Emperor. It shone like an eternal sun. I still failed in the end. In front of the dimensional Rubik's Cube, a humanoid creature stared at the shimmering word, Human Emperor, and sighed softly. As for most of the humans on Earth, they fell into a frenzy. Even though they didn't know who Human Emperor was, and they weren't even sure if he was a human, there seemed to be something else in the hearts of most humans. It was inexplicable, but it made their hearts feel a little heavier and less impetuous. Zhouwen had been playing with his phone all this time. He hadn't left his room for days, but at that moment, he was pulled to the Rubik's Cube by Li Xian and looked at the glorious word, Human Emperor. Old Zhou, why do I find this word so pleasing to the eye? Li Xian felt something surge in his body. He wished he could do something, but he had nowhere to vent it. Finally, he said that. This word is a little ugly, Zhouwen said after looking at the word for a long time. Is it ugly? Why don't I think so? Li Xian tilted his head and sized it up for a moment before shaking his head. It's a little ugly, Zhouwen said as he walked to the Rubik's Cube and reached out to touch it. The Rubik's Cube immediately lit up as Zhouwen's body was sucked into it. However, this time, he didn't teleport to any dimensional zone. Instead, he appeared in an empty darkness. In the darkness, there were 7 blobs of light that shimmered. Upon closer inspection, he realized that they were 7 companion eggs of different shape. Are these the Big Dipper companion eggs? Zhouwen looked at the 7 companion eggs. Although he knew that they were likely his, he couldn't feel happy. With the Big Dipper shattered, companion beasts were born. If Earth's companion beasts were to appear in the future, the outcome of the Big Dipper would be the outcome of Earth. As Zhouwen was pondering over it, the 7 companion eggs glowed brightly at the same time. All of them trembled as though they were about to fly towards Zhouwen. However, when they really moved, they didn't fly towards Zhouwen. As though they were attracted by an invisible vortex, they spun around the center of the void. As they spun faster and faster, the light on their bodies turned into meteors that flew toward the center of the vortex, and the light on their bodies became weaker and weaker. The center of the vortex devoured so much light, but it became darker and darker. It was as though the darkness had turned corporeal, condensing into a black companion egg. When the light on the 7 companion eggs completely vanished, they vanished as well, leaving only the extremely black companion egg floating in the void. The Big Dipper's companion beast was actually absorbed by the North Star's companion beast. What kind of companion beast is it? A sword? Or a suit of armor? Or could it be? Before Zhouwen could finish his thoughts, the absolute darkness companion beast charged at Zhouwen and instantly shot into his forehead. A black tattoo gradually appeared on Zhouwen's glabella. The tattoo's style was strange, as though it didn't have a fixed shape. It constantly changed every second, making it difficult to see its true appearance. With a thought, the constantly changing black tattoo tore out of his body and transformed into a companion beast that appeared in front of Zhouwen. This is Purple Star Lord. Zhouwen looked at the companion beast in front of him in surprise. The companion beast was dressed in absolute darkness armor. As it was too dark, it couldn't even reflect light. At a glance, it looked like a black silhouette. However, its posture resembled purple Star-Lord's, but it gave Zhou-Wen a different feeling. Although Zhou-Wen had already received the companion beast's information, he habitually took out his phone to take a look. Mystic Tharch, Calamity Grade, Evolvable, Life Providence, Thearch Life Soul, Mystic Wheel of Destiny, Birth, S-Grade, Terror Transformation, Nirvana Calamity Domain, Universe Dominator, Heavenly Realm, Strength, 999 Speed, 999 Constitution, 999 Essence Energy, 999 Talent Skill, None Companion Form, Soul Holy *T. What the hell is this? Zhou-Wen looked at Mystic Thearch's stats and couldn't close his mouth for a long time. In terms of stats, it was the best of the best. It was directly at the Heaven Realm, and all its stats were 999. Zhou-Wen had only seen such stats on Truth Listener. This was the second one. However, this thing didn't even have a skill. One had to know that the 7 Astral Lords each had their own special skills. Furthermore, each special skill was very unique. As long as it was used well, it would be a killing machine. There was no need to mention Purple Star-Lord. Just the Heavenly Cycle Stellar Array was endless. This thing gathered the characteristics of 8 planets' companion beasts, but it didn't have a single skill. Wasn't that a pure strength-type companion beast? Zhou-Wen already had Truth Listener, so no one would complain about having too many top-notch companion beasts. However, it was repetitive after all. Furthermore, no matter how strong a power-type companion beast was, it was probably not stronger than Truth Listener. It was impervious to all Dharma, and this thing didn't have such an ability. It was easily affected by all sorts of taboo powers, and its powerful strength might not be able to be used in actual combat. You should at least give me 2 skills. Even without the Heavenly Cycle Stellar Array, any 2 of the other Astral Lords' Damage Reflection and Book Prison powers would do. Zhou-Wen was somewhat depressed, but he knew that Mystic Tharch definitely had his advantages. As Zhou-Wen received the Mystic Tharch companion beast, the word Human Emperor on the Magic Cube's screen finally dissipated. The Magic Cube's screen gradually darkened and returned to its dead silent state. Everyone believed that the matter was over. Some people had already planned on switching off their phones to do something else. Even the livestream program was preparing to switch to the host and guests' comments. However, to everyone's surprise, the Magic Cube that had just darkened suddenly lit up again. Everyone looked at the scene in astonishment, unsure of what had happened. They imagined that something had yet to happen, but when they saw the scene on the Rubik's Cube clearly, they realized that a new dimensional zone had appeared on the Rubik's Cube. A new Rubik's Cube battle had begun. Why did a new dimensional zone appear so quickly? The Magic Cube actually activated the Magic Cube battle consecutively. I don't think this has happened before? What is this place? It doesn't look like a planet, right? It looks unfamiliar. I don't think I've seen it before. The people on Earth looked at the scene on the Magic Cube, but no one recognized what dimensional zone it was. End of this chapter. Chapter 1738. On the Rubik's Cube was a lake shrouded in fog. At a glance, there was only lake water and fog. Although one couldn't see the end, for some reason, it made people feel like it was a lake and not an ocean. It was impossible to tell what place it was just from the scene. There were countless rivers and lakes on Earth. It was impossible to guess what place it was just from looking at such a scene. People were discussing what place it was. The analysts of the various programs also had all sorts of guesses, but no one could say for sure what place it was. Zhou-Wen came out of the Rubik's Cube and immediately saw the scene on it. His pupils immediately constricted. Old Zhou, the Rubik's Cube is here to give you warmth again. From the looks of it, you have benefits to reap again, Li Xian said with a smile as he looked at the scene on the Rubik's Cube. I'm afraid it won't be that simple this time. Zhou-Wen's expression was somewhat solemn. What do you mean? Who on earth can compete with you for first place? Li Xian asked in puzzlement. No one on earth can compete with me, but I'm afraid it's not only humans on earth. Zhou stared at the Rubik's Cube screen without blinking. You mean? Li Xian seemed to guess something as his expression turned odd. He looked at the scene on the Rubik's Cube and said, Don't tell me you're trying to say that the dimensional zone on the Rubik's Cube is a dimensional zone? I've been to a dimensional zone once. It does look very similar. Get Ming Xiu over, Zhou said. Li Xian hurriedly called Ming Xiu over. After Ming Xiu arrived, without waiting for Li Xian to ask, he directly said, I saw it on the livestream. The place on the Rubik's Cube is very likely in a dimensional zone. What do you mean by possible? Li Xian asked. Previously, when I went to the dimension, the places I went were limited to the humans. I haven't been anywhere outside the humans. The place on the screen is completely different from where the humans are, but there's one place that's very similar, Ming Xiu said. What place is similar? Li Xian looked left and right, but he couldn't tell the difference between the lake on the screen and the lake on Earth. It was just that there was more fog. Ming Xiu explained, the dimensional space is different from our space. There, creatures below the mythical stage can't even see the matter around them, much less move. It's just like how three-dimensional creatures can't understand the four-dimensional world. Then it's even more impossible for it to be a dimensional zone. This scene has been broadcasted for quite some time. This scene can be seen by everyone on the internet. Even children who can't cultivate. Even children who can't cultivate can see it, Li Xian said. In essence, it's a manifestation of order and rules. As I've been to the dimension, I can sense the existence of similar order and rules above the fog lake. The reason why ordinary people can see it is because of the existence of the magic cube. It modifies the transmitted scene. If one really goes there, the average person will only see distorted dazzling light. No, I'm afraid they won't even be able to see the dazzling light. They will be killed directly. Ming Xiu explained. Li. Really? Li's Tian. Li. Really? Li. Ming Xiu thinks so too. From the looks of it, it's right. Zhou nodded as many thoughts flashed through his mind. Heavens, if that's really a dimensional zone, doesn't that mean that we can storm into the dimension through the Rubik's Cube? Li Xian's eyes lit up. In theory, that's naturally the case. However, have you ever thought about why the Rubik's Cube can produce a dimensional zone? Ming Xiu said. Isn't that simple? It means that the Rubik's Cube is extremely powerful. It can even connect to dimensional zones, Li Xian said. Ming Xiu shook his head and smiled bitterly. Can't you think deeper? If you have something to say, say it. Are you itching for a beating again? How dare you keep me in suspense? Li Xian snorted coldly. What if the dimension is a dimensional zone? Ming Xiu asked. Li Xian was taken aback when he heard that. His expression turned ugly as he said after a while, That's impossible, right? The possibility isn't high, but what if it is? Ming Xiu said with a bitter smile, Even if it isn't, this dimensional zone is in the dimension. In other words, there's no suppression from Earth's universe laws. If those dimensional life forms can also enter, do you think we humans still have a chance of obtaining first place on the Rubik's Cube rankings? Having been to the dimension, Ming Xiu knew better than Li Xian how terrifying it was. The human emperor was already considered very strong on Earth, but in the dimension, life forms in the apocalypse really weren't considered experts. I was only thinking about how to use this thing to counterattack the dimension. I forgot about this, Li Xian said gloomily. The Rubik's Cube shouldn't be used that way, right? If those freaks from the dimension can also be ranked, then we humans won't have anything to play with. No, those life forms from the dimension will definitely be ranked. Zhou sighed. Didn't the dimension control the Rubik's Cube in the past? Although it's obvious that they can't really control the Rubik's Cube, it's certain that they can enter it. The only thing they can't adapt to is the laws of Earth's universe. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's something from their dimension to begin with. At most, we can just give it to them. We can storm our way over when we have the strength in the future, Li Xian said after some thought. I'm afraid this matter isn't that simple. I have a nagging feeling that something is amiss, but I can't figure it out for a moment, Zhou said with a frown. It wasn't just Zhou. The factions with spokespeople also realized that this dimensional zone was unusual. They were alarmed and doubtful as they guessed what it meant. As people discussed, the Rubik's Cube screen suddenly changed. Someone had activated the Rubik's Cube challenge. Someone challenged the Rubik's Cube so quickly? I wonder who it is? Is it Human Emperor? Mo or Koloman? There are so many people who dare to take risk. I still don't know what dimensional zone this is, but someone has already challenged it. Ordinary people discussed, but those who truly understood what kind of dimensional zone this was were filled with worry. When the challenger appeared on the screen, the expressions of many human experts changed. Gold as armor and dark gold as staff. It looked no different from a human, but the lifeform's body was more than twice as tall as a human's. It was at least 4 to 5 meters tall. On the lifeform's forehead was a third eye. When it opened, it was like a golden sun. It was very similar to the Sun Holy God carved in the Sun Holy Temple. Chapter 1739. It's indeed in the dimension, Li Xian said gloomily as he looked at the golden godlike creature. Zhou, Ming Xiu, and company didn't say a word as they watched the creature walk towards the lake. His body emitted a golden glow that resembled the sun. The fog on the lake's surface was rapidly dispersed, and the area within 1,000 meters immediately became clear. However, there was still nothing on the lake's surface. There were only ripples as far as the eye could see. The Sun Clansman walked across the lake's surface as though he was walking on flat ground. He had the bearing of a true god that had descended to the mortal world. He hadn't gone far when the water in the lake suddenly surged. The lake water seemed to turn into a spirit, turning into a pair of hands that wrapped around the Sun Race's legs. It was about to pull him into the lake. The Sun Race member's body shone with a golden light, and his arms seemed to evaporate from the high temperature, turning into steam in an instant. There was also a strange scream that sounded underwater, and then there was no more sound. Moments later, the lake's water seemed to boil. Waves churned as pairs of water arms extended out of the lake. The entire lake's surface seemed to turn into a forest of arms. Countless water arms reached out towards the Sun Clan. In the distance, the water arms emerged from the water as well. It could be seen that those were water demons that were condensed from water. They looked a bit like humans, but their ears were like fish fins, and where their legs should have been was a snake's tail. Seeing countless water demons leap out of the water and pounce at the Sun Clansman, the Sun Clansman didn't panic at all. His body emitted sun-divine light as all the water demons that were illuminated immediately turned into water vapor. None of the water demons could approach his body. The Sun Clansman walked on the water step by step as he walked towards the depths of the fog lake. There were countless water demons in the lake, but none of them could approach his body. Along the way, countless water demons were vaporized by the sun-divine light. In less than a minute, the fog in front of him cleared up and a swath of green appeared in front of him. Originally, there was a small green island on the lake. The island was flat and the ground was covered with green grass. Only in the center of the island grew a large tree. The tree looked like a crown. The tree looked ordinary, but the leaves seemed to be made of silver. There were also many gold-like fruits on the tree, and the shape was somewhat similar to apples. The Sun Being walked in front of the tree and reached out to pluck a golden apple. Then, he walked to a place that looked like a teleportation array. As the teleportation array lit up, the Sun Being disappeared. The image on the Rubik's Cube changed and the Rubik's Cube ranking appeared. The name Sun Race's Luolai appeared. That's it. It looks very simple. The fruits on the tree are limited. I don't know if there are any left after plucking them. Why don't I take the opportunity to pluck a fruit first? Li Xian said. It looks simple, but there's something profound about it. Don't act rashly. Ming Xiu hurriedly stopped Li Xian. Just as Li Xian was about to say something, he saw the Rubik's Cube's screen light up again. Someone had challenged the Rubik's Cube again. It's the representative of the family of gods, Radi. Li Xian immediately recognized a human whose entire body was burning with flames. He looked like a fire god. Radi clearly had the same thoughts as Li Xian. He wanted to seize the initiative and pluck a golden apple first. Luo Lai of the Sun race had relied on the power of the sun to safely cross the fog lake. His power of fire and the power of the sun were both blazing yang powers, so he believed that it wouldn't be difficult for him to deal with the water demons. However, when he landed on the lake's surface, his body sank into the lake. Luo Lai's face revealed a look of horror as though he was struggling to fly up. However, it was useless. His body, which had long been engulfed in flames, quickly sank into the lake. All one could see was a blob of red light gradually dimming in the lake before disappearing moments later. The Rubik's Cube returned to the ranking, and there were only the names of the Sun race on it. Li Xian's expression was extremely ugly as he said with lingering fear, "That was close. That Radi is at the calamity grade after all. He also has the power of fire that can restrain water, yet he died just like that. Thankfully I didn't go." It wasn't just Li Xian who felt lingering fear. Upon seeing this scene, many people on Earth were alarmed. Radi was considered a famous figure. During the Battle of the Big Dipper, he had once entered the top 10. They never expected him to die so silently. Instantly, the fog lake and Luo Lai became a hot topic of discussion. Due to Luo Lai's appearance, most people knew that it might be a dimensional zone. People were clearly more curious about the dimensional zone. Of course, they were also guessing what level Luo Lai was at. A calamity-grade Radi had died silently, but Luo Lai had been able to easily cross the fog lake. The difference was huge. Some people even guessed that he was at the apocalypse grade. However, human experts like Zhou knew that it was impossible for Luo Lai to be at the apocalypse grade. However, it was very likely that he was at the heaven realm. Although Zhou was also paying attention to the matter of the fog lake, he had no intention of challenging it. The most important thing now was to quickly advance the remaining 2 essence energy arts to the calamity grade. Tai Sui and Primordial Spore were doing well in the Kunlun Mountain Canyon. The spores had helped them greatly. Tai Sui had already reached the man stage of the calamity grade, and was still growing. It was only a matter of time before Primordial Spore advanced to the calamity grade. In the future, they would be 2 very important combat forces. However, he hadn't found a suitable dimensional zone that matched the Godfiend era. This left Zhou depressed. "Old Zhou, look who's here." On this day, Zhou was studying the dimensional zone information in his hands when he heard Li Xian's voice from afar. "Wang Lu." Zhou went out and saw Li Xian and Wang Lu walking over side by side. "Zhou, why don't you look any different? Even a woman like me is a little jealous." Wang Lu sized up Zhou and said with a smile. "You haven't changed much either," Zhou said. Li Xian jeered, "Old Zhou, what's wrong with your eyes? Wang Lu has clearly grown up a lot, alright?" Not only did Li Xian emphasize the word big, but he also dragged it out. As he spoke, he even glanced at Wang Lu. Zhou couldn't help but follow his gaze. Wang Lu's face immediately flushed red as she slapped Li Xian's face, causing his face to turn to the side as his mouth contorted. "This isn't fair. Old Zhou, you saw it too. What right do you have to hit me?" Li Xian rubbed his face and said indignantly. "It's your fault for having such a cheap mouth." Wang Lu scoffed and turned to Zhou. "I heard you're looking for a spatial dimensional zone." Chapter 1740. How did you know? Zhou asked in surprise. He had gotten Li Xian to secretly carry out his search for a spatial dimensional zone. Although it wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was absolutely confidential, he didn't tell anyone else. I say, old Zhou, it's been so many years. Why haven't you improved at all? They're clearly keeping it closed all the time. Ouch. Before Li Xian could finish his sentence, Wang Lu pinched him. Alright, you guys chat. I'll leave. I'll leave, alright? Li Xian winked at Zhou before turning to walk out. After Li Xian left, Wang Lu said to Zhou, I heard from Li Xian that you were looking for a spatial dimensional zone. I happened to encounter a special spatial dimensional zone recently. If you're interested, I can take you there to take a look. Just give me a call. Why did you make a trip yourself? Zhou asked. The corners of Wang Lu's eyes twitched as she couldn't help but have the urge to tap her fingers. However, she suppressed it in the end and said to Zhou, that dimensional zone is a little special. It's not convenient to say it over the phone, so I came here myself. What kind of dimensional zone is it? Zhou hurriedly asked as he was worried about this problem. Wang Lu was somewhat disappointed, but she still said, I still don't know the name of that dimensional zone. It's located in Lop Nor. Zhou was slightly taken aback. He had heard of this place before. It was west of the East District. In ancient times, it was known as the Ear of Earth and the Sea of Death. It was said that many strange and bizarre things had happened before the dimensional storms descended. Yes, it's Lop Nor. There aren't many dimensional zones there, but it's very strange. An elder of my family accidentally entered it and discovered a dimensional zone. Wang Lu explained the dimensional zone in detail. The elder of the Wang family had originally gone to the edge of the desert to search for a companion beast, but due to an accident, he lost his way and mistakenly entered Lop Nor. Lop Nor was already extremely dangerous in ancient times. After the dimensional storms descended, it became even stranger. Almost no one who entered by mistake could come out. The Wang family member originally believed that he was doomed, but to his surprise, he discovered a dimensional zone. After something happened in the dimensional zone, he actually walked out alive. The place he came out of was no longer the desert, but the sea at the other end. That sea was equally famous. It was the Bermuda Triangle, also known as the Devil's Triangle. This was because even the Wang family member himself couldn't explain what was going on. There were many experiences that even he didn't know what was going on. However, there were some key experiences that could confirm that he had experienced some special spatial force. There were no dimensional creatures in that dimensional zone, but no matter where he went, he would eventually return to the same place. This wasn't considered strange. What was strange was the mark he left behind. After realizing that he had lost himself, the Wang family member left a lighter in a spot and continued walking. After walking for an unknown period of time, he saw the lighter again. What was even stranger was that he realized that he had another lighter on him. He only had one lighter, and it had already been placed on the ground as a mark. It was impossible for him to have a second one, but when he saw his lighter, he subconsciously touched his pocket. There was another lighter inside. When he took it out, it was identical to the lighter on the ground. He was given a fright. The Wang family member threw both lighters on the ground. After going around in a circle, he had another lighter in his hand. After circling around a few times, there was a pile of lighters in front of him. All the lighters were identical, be it their age or anything else. Even he couldn't tell which one was his lighter. In that case, it's probably not just spatial powers there. It might very well involve the power of spacetime. Zhou thought for a moment and asked, how did he walk out? How did he end up in Bermuda? I don't know. Wang Lu shook her head and said, in the end, he couldn't hold on any longer and fainted. When he woke up, he was already on the beach. That's interesting, Zhou said after some thought. Our family plans on exploring that dimensional zone. If you're interested, you can come with us, Wang Lu said. Alright, count me in. Zhouwen felt that this dimensional zone was quite unusual. Perhaps it could really match the Godfiend era. Even if he didn't enter, he could search for the tiny palm symbol. Even if it didn't match the Godfiend era, he had to make a trip to help Wang Lu. The two of them chatted for a while. After agreeing on a time, Wang Lu said that her family was preparing to explore the dimensional zone. She couldn't stay here for too long, so she returned to the Wang family. I say, old Zhou, are you stupid? Was your head kicked by a donkey when you were young? Li Xian was rendered speechless when he heard what Zhouwen said. What do you mean? Zhouwen frowned. Li Xian sighed and said, You're a beast. You wasted Wang Lu's good intentions. What about me? Wang Lu wants to explore that dimensional zone. Didn't I agree to help her? Zhouwen said. She needs your help? Are you shameless? With Wang Lu's luck, does she need your help? And do you know what that thing she said means? If she leaves something behind, another thing will appear. Furthermore, it can be replicated infinitely. If it wasn't a lighter but a high-level companion egg or skill crystal, do you know what it means? Li Xian wore an exasperated expression. I really haven't thought of that. Zhouwen was taken aback. He immediately understood the true value of the dimensional zone. Even if he didn't discover anything else inside, just using this strange phenomenon could produce unimaginable benefit. She placed a huge secret in front of you, but you still think you're helping her. Are you a beast? Li Xian couldn't help but curse again. In that case, I really owe Wang Lu a huge favor. I'll have to return it in the future, Zhouwen said after some thought. Li Xian was rendered speechless as though he couldn't be bothered to say anything else to Zhouwen. Do whatever you want. Anyway, if you let Wang Lu down in the future, as a brother, I'll definitely stand on her side. With that said, Li Xian left. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to resist beating Zhouwen up if he continued talking to him. End of this chapter. Chapter 1741. For the next few days, aliens plucked the golden apples from the rankings, but not a single human made it onto the rankings. Even the human spokespersons didn't make it onto the Rubik's Cube rankings, much less pluck the golden apples. Even powerful spokespersons like Mo, he didn't challenge the Rubik's Cube at all. Ordinary people only hoped that a human could make it onto the rankings, but they didn't know that the spokespersons had basically received warnings from aliens not to challenge the Rubik's Cube. There were only a total of 37 golden apples on the tree. Seeing the number of golden apples constantly decrease, more and more people hoped that Human Emperor could fight and occupy a spot on the Rubik's Cube. Zhouwen couldn't hear their summoning. He followed Wang Lu and company into the strange Lop Nor. The electronic equipment here didn't have any signal, so he had no idea what was happening outside. The endless desert had been a forbidden zone for humans since ancient times. Once one got lost in it, they would die in a few days without the support of water and food. They had a water elemental Terragrade expert in their group, so it wasn't difficult for them to obtain water. There was also plenty of food, so there was no need to worry. However, this didn't mean that they could do whatever they wanted. After the dimensional storms, Lop Nor was far more terrifying than before. The group walked carefully. It was unknown if it was because of Wang Lu's existence, but they didn't encounter too many dangers along the way. However, after walking for a few days, they failed to find the dimensional zone mentioned by the Wang family. Third uncle, where should we go now? Wang Lu frowned as she looked at the endless salt crust desert and asked the middle-aged man beside her. The middle-aged man's name was Wang Huaiduan. In terms of seniority, he was Wang Lu's third uncle. He was in his 40s and was only at the mythical stage after using the mythical liquid. He was the one who discovered the dimensional zone back then. Sorry, family head. Back then, I walked into that dimensional zone in a daze. I only know that it's roughly in this area. I really have no idea where it is now, Wang Huaiduan said in shame. Wang Lu had no intention of blaming him. Back then, it wasn't strange that Wang Huaiduan couldn't figure out the dimensional zone's location. She didn't expect Wang Huaiduan to remember much. All she needed to do was confirm that it was in this area. It's fine. It's in this area, right? Wang Lu asked again. It shouldn't be wrong, Wang Huaiduan said. Wang Lu nodded and looked at Zhouwen, who was playing with his phone. Zhouwen, lend me one of your shoes. What for? Zhouwen sat on the back of the great Might Vajra bull and asked as he took off his shoes and threw them to Wang Lu when he heard her. Let's try our luck. Wang Lu took Zhouwen's shoe and threw it out. She looked in the direction the shoe landed and said, Go that way. As she spoke, Wang Lu picked up the shoe and returned it to Zhouwen. The Wang family didn't have any doubts about Wang Lu's seemingly childish actions as they walked in the direction she had pointed out. Zhouwen took the shoes and put them on. He looked at Wang Lu curiously and asked, Why didn't you use this method previously? People can't have too many extravagant hopes. If you wish for too many blessings that don't belong to you, it might not be a good thing even if you obtain them in the end, Wang Lu said ambiguously. Zhouwen nodded. He understood a little. Although Wang Lu's power of luck was very strong, she wasn't the goddess of luck with infinite divine powers. There were probably limits to her power of luck. She might not be able to resolve everything with luck. If everything could be resolved by luck, Wang Lu would have long become the strongest human. In fact, Wang Lu still hadn't advanced to the Calamity Realm. The group continued on their way. After walking for less than half a day, Wang Huaiduan suddenly pointed at a spot in front of him and shouted, There it is. That's the entrance to the dimensional zone. Zhouwen looked in the direction he was pointing and saw a lake appear on the endless salt crust. The lake wasn't big, and its surface was like a mirror without any ripples. Wang Huaiduan continued excitedly, Do you see that strange-shaped boulder by the lake? As long as we pass through it, we will be able to enter that strange dimensional zone. The strange-shaped boulder that Wang Huaiduan mentioned was a boulder that was more than 10 meters tall. Perhaps because it had been ravaged by the sandstorm for a long period of time, there was a huge crack in the middle of the boulder that could allow two people to pass through side by side. Zhouwen looked at the crack on the boulder. Through the crack, he could see the lake behind it. It didn't seem any different. Let's rest here for the night. We'll explore the dimensional zone tomorrow. Wang Lu led everyone to the boulder, but she didn't immediately enter. Looking at the setting sun, she instructed everyone to set up tents and set up a temporary camp. Zhouwen circled the vicinity but didn't find the tiny palm symbol. All he could do was return to the camp resentfully. Zhouwen brought his own tent and lived alone. When he was resting at night, he saw Wang Lu pull open the curtain and enter. Why? Can't sleep? Zhouwen asked with a smile. Wang Lu sat down and shook her head. I need your help with something. What is it? The reason Zhouwen didn't immediately agree wasn't because he wanted to consider the pros and cons, but because he felt that Wang Lu's request for his help was probably no trivial matter. He had to treat it carefully and not let her down. Wang Lu took out a box and placed it in front of Zhouwen. Help me hold this. After entering the dimensional zone tomorrow, if everything goes well, place it in a suitable place. Could it be? Before Zhouwen could finish his sentence, Wang Lu pressed her finger to his lips. It's good that you know. I'll leave it to you. With that said, Wang Lu got up and left the tent without staying any longer. Zhouwen looked at the box in front of him and couldn't help but frown. If he guessed correctly, the box was likely an important treasure that Wang Lu had prepared. It was very likely a high-level companion egg. As companion beasts couldn't be too far from their owners, there was no way to replicate them in dimensional zones. This was also why Wang Huaiduan hadn't experimented. It was because he didn't have a companion egg on him, so there was no way for him to experiment. This time, the Wang family had come prepared. They must have prepared a very high-level companion egg or some other treasure. However, He didn't know why Wang Lu had placed the item in the box with him. Zhou didn't open the box to see what it was. He put it away and continued grinding the game dungeons. After an uneventful night, the Wang family packed their things the next morning and passed through the boulder in a grandiose manner. Zhou followed the team, and the moment he passed through the rift, the scene in front of him didn't seem much different from what he had just seen. End of this chapter. Chapter 1742. They could clearly see the saltwater lake behind the boulder, but after passing through the boulder, they still saw the saltwater lake in front of them. It didn't seem any different. Did we really enter a dimensional zone? Someone asked in puzzlement. Many people wanted to ask this question. Even Zhou was somewhat puzzled. After passing through the gap in the boulder, it didn't seem any different from before. It's different, very different. Wang Huaiduan said with certainty. If we don't pass through the gap in this boulder, we will leave this saltwater lake no matter where we go. And after passing through the gap in the boulder, no matter where we go, we will eventually return to the lake. It's as though we are constantly circling the saltwater lake. Has samsara already begun? Zhou asked as he sized up his surroundings. It should have already begun. However, after we leave this place, we won't be able to see this boulder no matter how we walk. In other words, it's impossible for us to leave this place again. Wang Huaiduan thought for a moment and said, Back then, I walked for a long time, but I wasn't able to leave this place. I thought I was doomed. I was already exhausted and delirious. A dragon suction suddenly appeared in the lake, and I was sucked in. When I woke up, I was already on the shore of the Devil Triangle. I don't know how I got out. Third uncle, come with us. Xuan, lead a team and stay in front of the boulder to guard it. Wang Lu calmly commanded, looking somewhat like a family head. She seemed somewhat different from the Wang Lu Zhou knew in the past. Apart from the 5-man team that stayed in front of the boulder, the others followed Wang Lu, including Zhou. This time, the Wang family didn't leave anything behind. They wanted to see if they could still see the 5-man team when they returned. Zhou followed them and activated his sure domain to scan his surroundings, especially the lake. If there was anything strange, it was the most likely place to be problematic. However, after scanning for a while, Zhou didn't discover anything within the sure domain's range. There didn't seem to be any creatures in the lake. Not to mention dimensional creatures, he didn't even discover ordinary microorganisms. The salt content in this lake is very high. People can float if they jump in. I previously tried to jump into the lake, hoping to find some dimensional creatures as food, but I didn't find anything, Wang Huaiduan said as he walked. Wang Lu only listened quietly without saying a word. Everyone circled the lake and didn't wander around randomly. However, after walking for a long time, they estimated that they had almost circled the lake once, but they still didn't see the boulder they had entered from. It is indeed strange. Zhou frowned slightly. He didn't sense any changes in the space. Boulder and the Wang family members guarding it had vanished. This dimensional zone was indeed not simple. Literally, follow the plan, Wang Lu said to a youth from the Wang family. The young man nodded and stayed by the lake. The others continued to walk around the lake. The youth had a portion of the Wang family's companion eggs on him. If the companion eggs could split into 2 when they found him, the Wang family would truly prosper. This dimensional zone is indeed a little strange. Be careful, Zhou whispered to Wang Lu as he walked beside her. He had a nagging feeling of discomfort, or rather, this dimensional zone made him feel somewhat uneasy. Mr. Zhou, don't worry. The last time I came, I circled around here for a few days and didn't discover any dimensional creatures. I even spent quite a while in the lake. If there were dimensional creatures, they would have eaten me long ago, Wang Huaiduan said. There's nothing wrong with being careful. Everyone buck up, Wang Lu said. The Wang family responded and continued walking around the lake. Perhaps Zhou was too sensitive, but he didn't encounter anything along the way. Zhou estimated that they were almost done circling the lake. He focused his gaze forward, hoping to see Little Lee, who had stayed behind. He really saw him. Just like when they left, Little Lee was sitting by the lake, fiddling with the sand in boredom. As Zhou watched, his expression suddenly changed slightly. Little Lee is over there. After walking for a while, someone finally saw Little Lee and shouted in pleasant surprise. "Quick, let's see if the companion egg on him has turned into two." Everyone became excited as they quickened their pace and ran towards Little Lee. As they ran, everyone's footsteps slowed down again, and an indescribable look of horror appeared on their faces. This was because they realized that there wasn't one Little Lee sitting there, but two identical Little Lee sitting side by side. The reason why Zhou Wen's expression changed drastically was that he had seen two Little Lees. Furthermore, under the Sure domain, he couldn't tell which one was the real Little Lee. Or rather, both Little Lees were real. Can even replicate people? Despite being so close, Zhou Wen still couldn't tell the difference between the two Little Lees. At this moment, the two Little Lees also discovered Zhou Wen and company. They immediately got up and ran towards them. As they ran, they shouted, "Family head? Oh no. Something strange happened. There's another me. No. Something's pretending to be me." There was nothing wrong with what he said, but the problem was that the two Little Lees said the same thing. Even their expressions were the same. Instantly, everyone was dumbfounded. "Little Lee, stand there and don't move," Wang Lu said as she stared at the two Little Lees. Without any hesitation, the two Little Lees stopped, as though they were very convinced by Wang Lu's orders. "Take out the companion eggs you have on you," Wang Lu continued. The two Little Lees took off the backpacks on their backs and took out the companion eggs inside. There were a total of 7 companion eggs. Each companion egg was different, but the 2 companion eggs were identical, as though they were twins. I should have thought of it long ago. If this godforsaken place can replicate lighters, humans should be replicated as well. I shouldn't have left Little Lee here, Wang Huaiduan said with a sigh. Family head, third uncle, quickly think of a solution. I don't want there to be 2 of me, the 2 Little Lees said with sullen expressions. Wang Lu was momentarily at a loss. She couldn't tell which Little Lee was the original Little Lee. She couldn't help but look at Zhou Wen. Zhou Wen shook his head slightly. He couldn't tell which Little Lee was the real one. Leave the companion eggs here first. Let's continue. Wang Lu thought for a moment and got someone to leave the companion eggs she had brought here. Then, she took the 2 Little Lees with her and continued circling the lake. Now, he really didn't dare leave them here. He couldn't deal with the 2 Little Lees. If he were to create a few more Little Lees, his wife would probably be in a difficult position when he returned. End of this chapter. Chapter 1743. Although Zhou Wen also wanted to see if he could replicate the good stuff he had, it would be insane if he could replicate a few things like the mysterious phone. Even if the mysterious phone couldn't replicate them, it would be excellent to obtain a few immortal culling swords and immortal extinguishing sword. Of course, Zhou Wen didn't really do that. He had to figure out what was going on with this dimensional zone before he dared to use something like the immortal culling sword to make an attempt. Otherwise, if something went wrong, it wouldn't be worth it. Looking at the 2 Little Lees walking in the middle of the group, Zhou Wen had a nagging feeling that something was amiss. If anything could really be replicated and there were endless benefits, wouldn't this dimensional zone be a little too powerful? The Wang family was also very uneasy. After all, the benefits were just too great, so great that it was unbelievable. If it wasn't for Wang Lu's extremely powerful luck ability, they wouldn't have dared to come despite knowing such benefits. The group of people had their own thoughts as they circled the saltwater lake again. When they arrived at the area where they had left their luggage, they realized that there were 2 identical piles of luggage. When they opened it, there was indeed one more item. However, only one of the items that Little Lee had replicated previously appeared. From the looks of it, there are two possibilities. One is that replicas can't be replicated. The second is that the same item can only be replicated once. Zhou muttered to himself. It's fine to replicate one at a time. 10 times means 10. If we stay here for a few days, we won't lack any companion beasts. The rise of the Wang family is just around the corner. The Wang family was extremely excited. Someone had already experimentally incubated the replicated companion egg. The result was identical to a normal companion egg. There was no difference. At this moment, no one doubted the value of replicating companion eggs. All they wanted now was to replicate more companion eggs and items. The only one who was more vexed was Little Li. He still couldn't tell the difference between the two Little Lis. All he could do was temporarily guard them to prevent any trouble. Family head, there's no mistake. This dimensional zone is our Wang family's blessed land. Leave everything you brought behind. Try your best to replicate as many things as possible. Who knows if there's a time limit here? An elder of the Wang family said to Wang Lu. There's no rush. Let's follow the original plan and leave a portion behind. Wang Lu shook her head. Someone tried to persuade Wang Lu, but they were interrupted by her. The plan is to protect the family's interests. If we don't act according to the plan, who will be responsible if anything happens? The Wang family exchanged looks. Finally, they followed Wang Lu's orders and only left behind a portion of the items before circling the lake again. What do you think? Wang Lu walked beside Zhou and asked softly. This place might very well be a spacetime dimensional zone. I left a few low-level companion eggs there. I should make some discoveries the next time, Zhou said. What do you mean? Wang Lu asked in puzzlement. Wang Lu had seen that Zhou had placed a few companion eggs there from the beginning. The companion eggs had also been replicated. If she did it again, there would only be one more. There didn't seem to be anything different, so she didn't know what Zhou was referring to. Zhou explained, I only left one of those companion eggs and the replicated companion eggs there. Wang Lu was extremely smart to begin with. Upon hearing Zhou's words, she immediately understood. You left a portion of the original companion eggs and a portion of the replicated companion eggs. If all the companion eggs are replicated again, it means that there's no limit to the replication. However, only one of the same items can be replicated at a time. If a portion of the companion eggs aren't replicated, it means that the replicas can't be replicated. Zhou nodded and said, if it's really the power of spacetime at work, then regardless of whether it's the original or the replicas, they should be able to replicate. No, it shouldn't be called replication. It's better to describe it as a parallel space. Those things come from a parallel space and not replicated. If the replicas aren't replicated, it's hard to say. Of course, it's only a guess now. We still need to wait for the result. Aren't you tempted at all when you see the replicated items? Wang Lu sized up Zhou and asked. At such a time, Zhou was still able to think about so many things without being affected at all. It left Wang Lu very surprised. Wang Lu was extremely lucky and usually didn't lack anything, but when she saw the replicated items, her willpower wavered. The reason why she insisted on following the plan was just to be safe. Even so, she wasn't in the mood to think too much about it. She wasn't as calm as Zhou. How can I not be tempted? However, Zhou seemed hesitant and didn't finish his sentence. If it's convenient, say it. If it's not convenient, there's no need to say it, Wang Lu said. There's nothing inconvenient about it. I'm just afraid that you will overthink things, Zhou said after some thought. Then say it directly. I definitely believe you, Wang Lu said seriously. I'm just afraid of trusting myself. I'd rather I'm wrong. Zhou smiled bitterly. Without waiting for Wang Lu to ask, he continued, to be honest, based on my past experience, every time I enter an unfamiliar dimensional zone, something seems to happen. It's rather thrilling every time, so no matter how tempted I am, I still have some reservations. I thought it was something. You gave me a fright. Don't worry. With me by your side, your luck will improve, Wang Lu said with a smile. There's nothing to worry about. I'm just afraid that you won't, Zhou Wen said with a smile. The two of them chatted as they walked. After circling around for a long time, everyone approached the place where the items were placed again. From afar, Zhou Wen saw another pile of items. The companion eggs he had placed were also among them. 1, 2, 6, no. Half of them haven't been replicated. Zhou Wen couldn't help but frown after counting in his heart. According to his previous guess, if space-time powers were at work, the companion eggs he left behind should have produced new ones, be it the original or replicas. However, half of them clearly hadn't been replicated. The replicas won't be replicated again? In other words, only the original will be replicated. Is this a space-time power? Wang Lu also saw Zhou Wen's companion eggs and immediately knew what had happened. There's still one more chapter. Let's wait a while. End of this chapter. Chapter 1744. I don't know. Zhou Wen shook his head slightly as he stared at the companion eggs and thought. However, everyone in the Wang family had already rushed towards the luggage. As long as they circled around, they could obtain many precious companion eggs. Things that they had to risk their lives for in the past could now be obtained with just a stroll. Anyone would be so excited that they couldn't control themselves. Family head, there's no mistake. All of them are correct. Don't hesitate any longer. Leave that thing behind. We don't know what will happen in the future. Take the opportunity to get a few more. A few elders of the Wang family came over to persuade Wang Lu. According to the plan, it's just the next round. There's no rush, Wang Lu said. The plan is set by people. When needed, we can be more flexible. There's no need to be so rigid. If we had left that thing behind earlier, there would already be 3. Apart from you, we can also have 1. The elder didn't finish his sentence, but Zhou Wen understood what he meant. It was likely that the Wang family had a special companion egg or some treasure. However, they didn't dare leave it there because they were afraid of an accident. Now that the Wang family saw the item being duplicated again and again, they couldn't help but want Wang Lu to duplicate more of it so that they could have one. As long as it can be duplicated, everyone will naturally have a share. There's only one round left. Let's go, Wang Lu said as she continued on her way, not giving them a chance to speak. The elders were somewhat helpless, but they didn't say anything else. They packed their things and continued on their way with Wang Lu. Did you discover anything? Wang Lu leaned over and asked when she saw Zhou Wen frowning in thought. No, but I thought of something. If I want to determine which one is the original Little Li, I can leave one Little Li there and see if he can be duplicated. That way, I can know if he's the original or not, Zhou Wen said. If the original is left behind, wouldn't there be another Little Li? Wang Lu said with a smile. Zhou Wen smiled as well. That's why I was just thinking about it. Actually, it's meaningless to distinguish it. Even if you know that it's a duplicate, you can't be so heartless as to kill him, right? That's right. Even if it's a duplicate, he's no different from Little Li. We grew up together, so how can we do it? Unless he's not Little Li at all. Wang Lu said gloomily. If it's not Little Li, who else can it be? Zhou Wen said as he turned to look at the 2 Little Lis. When he saw them, his expression suddenly changed. Because the other members of the Wang family were excited, they all wanted to walk faster. At first, they paid special attention to the 2 Lis, but now they unknowingly fell to the back, and no one wanted to watch them anymore. The 2 Little Lis were originally exactly the same, but looking at them now, one of the Little Lis had somehow changed. Xiaoli was only in his 20s. His eyes were quite big, and he had the black pupils of an Asian. But now, Xiaoli's head was lowered, and his eyes were completely white. He looked like a blind man. To an ordinary person, there were only so many differences, but in Zhou Wen's eyes, Little Li was emitting a strange aura. It was as though white smoke was rising from his body. Oh no, there's a problem with the replicated item. Zhou Wen's heart skipped a beat. Little Li, who had his head lowered, suddenly looked up and revealed a strange smile at Zhou Wen. The next moment, he pounced at the other Little Li beside him. As they were too close, Zhou Wen didn't have time to do anything. The moment the two Little Lis came into contact, they fused together like water and milk, turning from 2 to 1. Zhou Wen had already flashed in front of Little Li, but he didn't know what was happening to Little Li. Naturally, he couldn't kill him directly. All he did was reach out to grab Little Li's arm and restrain him. "Mr. Zhou, what are you doing?" Upon hearing the commotion behind them, the Wang family members in front stopped in their tracks and looked over. When they saw Zhou Wen grab Little Li's arm, they looked at him in puzzlement. "Didn't you notice that Little Li is missing?" Zhou Wen said as he stared at Little Li. As they were too excited, everyone had long forgotten about Little Li. They only recalled it when Zhou Wen mentioned it. "That's right. Why is there only one Little Li? Where did the other Little Li go? Don't tell me he ran away?" Everyone looked around but didn't find the other Little Li. "Zhou Wen, what happened?" Wang Lu didn't see the scene, so she didn't know that the two Little Li had fused into one. Zhou Wen recounted what he had seen and observed Little Li's reaction. Little Li was very obedient. He allowed Zhou Wen to grab him without moving, nor did he struggle or resist. His eyes looked a little demented. Everyone found it odd as they sized up Little Li. However, no matter how they looked at it, they couldn't imagine how the two of them had fused into one. "There's a problem with the replicated thing here. It can't be replicated again," Zhou Wen said to Wang Lu. Without waiting for Wang Lu to say anything, an elder from the Wang family said eccentrically, "Mr. Zhou, did the two Little Li really fuse into one?" "I saw it with my own eyes," Zhou Wen said. "There are so many people here. Why are you the only one who saw it? No one else saw it. Isn't this too much of a coincidence?" The elder snorted coldly. "Uncle Lu, what do you mean by that?" Wang Lu said unhappily. "Family head, I've already said that this matter can't be spread. It can't be spread, but you refused to listen and insisted on letting an outsider follow us. Now, he can't bear to see our Wang family doing well. Family head, what do you think we should do?" The elder said angrily. "Uncle Lu, what are you trying to say?" Wang Lu frowned. "We didn't see the two Little Li fuse into one, but only Mr. Zhou saw it. He even said with certainty that there's a problem with the replica and that it can't be replicated again. Don't you think there's a problem with that? Even if the two Little Li really fused into one, it doesn't mean that it can't be replicated. We just need to use one of the replicated things before they fuse. Why can't it be replicated? I think someone can't bear to see our Wang family doing well and is deliberately making things difficult for us. It's hard to say if the other Little Li has fused or if someone has done something to him." "Zhou Wen won't lie," Wang Lu said. "You might know a person for a long time, but you don't know his true nature. Family head, you are still young. There are some things you haven't seen through. In front of absolute benefits, what can't some people do?" The elder was amiable to Wang Lu, but when he turned to Zhou Wen, he wasn't as polite. Even if the two Little Li fused into one, he should be able to speak, right? If we ask him ourselves, won't the truth be revealed? Why are you holding him like that? End of this chapter. Chapter 1745. What do you want to ask? You can ask now. Zhou Wen didn't let go of Little Li's hand. "He's already half dead from your grasp. How are we going to ask?" A member of the Wang family said, "Let him go first. There are so many of us. Are you afraid that he will run?" "I'm not afraid of him running. I'm just afraid that he won't run." Zhou Wen didn't let go of Little Li. "Family head, what's the matter? Little Li is a subordinate of our Wang family after all. Even if we want to capture him for questioning, it should be done by our Wang family. What's the matter with an outsider? The elder said unhappily as he looked at Wang Lu. That's right. Why are the other things we replicated fine? Only Little Li is in trouble. Furthermore, he's clearly fine, but he looks half dead after being captured. He doesn't even know how to speak. I'm afraid someone has some ulterior motives. A member of the Wang family naturally has to be dealt with by the Wang family themselves. Many members of the Wang family were somewhat displeased with Zhou, but they didn't dare take action to snatch him away. They also knew that Zhou was powerful and not someone ordinary people could match. Zhou, what's the situation with Little Li now? Wang Lu asked Zhou. Although Wang Lu was the head of the family, it didn't mean that she could ignore the emotions of the Wang family. If the hearts of the people were gone, the family would also be gone. Wang Lu trusted Zhou, but she also had to appease the Wang family. I'm not sure either. I just feel that something is amiss. Zhou looked at the demented Little Li and thought of his smile. He had a nagging feeling that this fellow was somewhat dangerous. Listen, what are you saying? You can detain a member of our Wang family just because you feel that something is amiss? Family head, he can't even explain himself. How can he do such a thing? When the Wang family heard Zhou say that, they didn't believe him even more. They believed that he definitely had some ulterior motive. Wang Lu was somewhat stumped, but she didn't relent. Zhou could tell that Wang Lu was in a dilemma. After some thought, he said, "Forget it. Since you want him, I'll give him to you. However, if anything happens, it's none of my business. Outsiders don't need to worry about our Wang family," the Wang family members immediately said. With Wang Lu around, they felt that with her luck, it was unlikely that anything would happen to her. Desire is really a terrible thing. Zhou thought to himself, if this were any other time, these people wouldn't dare speak to me like this. For the sake of so many benefits, they aren't afraid of offending me. Oh well, it's not like I can keep Shaoli captive anyway. Let's see what's so strange about him. With that said, Zhou no longer held on to Little Li and returned him to the Wang family. The two members of the Wang family took Little Li from Zhou's hands. Although they were somewhat worried, afraid that there was really something wrong with Little Li, they felt a lot more at ease when they saw Little Li still in a daze. Little Li. After receiving Little Li, the Wang family wanted to wake him up and ask him some questions, but Little Li remained silent as if he had become a fool. They couldn't ask anything. Many people still suspected that Zhou had secretly done something to Little Li. They didn't believe that the two Little Li had fused into one. If they didn't know Zhou's strength, they would probably want to take him down first. Family head, I don't think there's a problem. Aren't those replicated companion eggs fine? Anyway, we aren't clones, so it should be fine. Let's not waste any more time. Let's continue. Everyone urged Wang Lu to quickly put down the treasures the Wang family had prepared and replicate a few more. All right. Wang Lu nodded and took out a box from her backpack, placing it on the pile of items. Zhou watched coldly from the side. This time, he didn't say a word. Everyone set off again and circled around the saltwater lake. Although some people were worried that something would happen, their desire for treasures exceeded their worries. Along the way, Zhou kept observing Little Li. He was being escorted forward by two members of the Wang family. He didn't react at all. When he returned to the place where the items were placed, there was indeed another pile of replicas. The box Wang Lu had taken out was also among them. See? I told you there's no problem. Isn't everything fine? Quick, let's go. Replicate a few more. It's best if each of us can get one. With this treasure land, our Wang family will definitely become an existence like the 6 families in the future. All of them were beaming with joy, as though they would soon become nobles on earth. Wang Lu didn't say a word as she looked at Zhou. Let's continue, Zhou said indifferently. It was useless to say anything else now. Furthermore, they couldn't leave, so all they could do was continue walking. Round after round, more and more things were replicated. Ignoring the Wang family's ecstasy, Zhou was also somewhat puzzled. He had clearly seen the two literally fuse into one, but the replicated companion eggs didn't have the same situation. Even the box Wang Lu had placed down had been replicated several times, but the strange phenomenon of fusion didn't happen. As for what was inside the box, Zhou knew what it was. As the Wang family members were too pleasantly surprised, someone accidentally let it slip. Only then did Zhou know that there was a calamity-grade companion egg inside. With the Wang family's standards, they likely didn't have the ability to hunt a calamity. It was likely that Wang Lu had obtained it through luck. After so many rounds, Little Li remained in a daze. He didn't realize what he had done. Could it be that there will only be problems after a living creature is replicated? Or could it be that only humans will have problems? Zhou pondered over the various possibilities. When he walked to the place where the items were placed again, there was indeed another pile of items. The Wang family members were so overjoyed that they were about to go crazy. Many of the replicated companion eggs were incubated by the Wang family, so there weren't any problems. As for the Calamity companion egg box, no one took it. Firstly, they needed Wang Lu's permission. Secondly, even if they took it now, they wouldn't be able to incubate it. The Wang family didn't even have a single calamity. Just relying on their own primordial energy was insufficient to incubate a calamity companion beast. Forcefully incubating it would only result in death from having their primordial energy sucked dry. Therefore, no one requested for it to be incubated now. Every time, Wang Lu only put away the replicated box without any intention of incubating it. Just as everyone was excited, Zhou saw Little Li, who had been in a daze, finally have an expression on his face. He revealed a strange smile again, but at this moment, no one noticed him apart from Zhou. This time, he didn't retract his smile. Instead, he kept smiling, making Zhou's hair stand on end. Little Li, are you awake? Why are you smiling? The Wang family member who was holding Little Li finally realized that something was amiss with him as he asked him. End of this chapter. Chapter 1746. Little Li still didn't say a word. All he did was look at the person smiling. The smile made the person's hair stand on end. When the others heard the sound, they looked over, but what they saw next was extremely strange and terrifying. The man grabbed Little Li's hand and sank it into Little Li's body. It was as if Little Li's body was not made of flesh, but quicksand. Ah! Everything happened too quickly. The person only had time to let out a tragic cry before most of his body fused into Little Li's body. A few members of the Wang family rushed over, hoping to stop the person from sinking further. However, when their hands touched the person's body, they felt as though they had been electrocuted. Their eyes rolled back as their bodies trembled non-stop. The few of them joined together and sank into Little Li's body. No good. Wang Lu was alarmed as she immediately released her companion beast to pull the few of them out. The companion beast that resembled a polar bear grabbed the two of them and tried to pull them out. However, when he exerted strength, he failed to pull them out. All he did was pull off half of his body. The rest of his body had already sunk into Little Li's body. Looking at the blood on the ground and the strange smile on Little Li's face, everyone felt their scalps tingle. A chill rose from the soles of their feet to their heads. "We can only kill him now," Zhou said when he saw Wang Lu still hesitating. The reason why Wang Lu could become the head of the Wang family was because she had an extremely lucky ability. However, in terms of personality, she was too kind and hated killing. In this era, she wasn't the best choice as a leader. The Wang family also knew that Wang Lu's personality was too docile. They had no choice but to let her become the family head because they needed her luck to bring luck to the family. "He's no longer Little Li, kill him." Wang Lu gritted her teeth and gave the order. The elders of the Wang family had long had the intention to kill. Just as Wang Lu finished speaking, A few people released their companion beasts and charged at Little Lee. However, when the companion beasts pounced on Little Lee, a strange scene happened again. One companion beast after another sank into Little Lee's body like the previous people. What the hell? Patriarch's companion beast was clearly fine just now. The few elders desperately tried to retrieve their companion beasts, but how could they do so? In the blink of an eye, they were sucked into Little Lee's body. No one dared to release their companion beasts again. All of them desperately released sword beams and saber beams at Little Lee. However, the sword light and saber energy had also sunk into Little Lee's body. Little Lee didn't seem to have a body of flesh and blood, but a black hole. Anything that got close to him would be sucked in. For a moment, everyone stopped and no longer dared to attack Xiaoli. They looked at him in shock. They looked at Xiaoli. Xiaoli, who had been standing motionless all this time, suddenly moved. Like a ghost, he charged at a member of the Wang family, his face still wearing that unchanging, mask-like smile. The person wanted to dodge, but he was much slower than Little Lee. All he could do was summon a companion beast to block. However, the companion beast was grabbed by Little Lee with one hand. His head was also grabbed by Little Lee's other hand. Then, the man and pet were sucked into Little Lee's body. Monster! This word appeared in everyone's hearts. Then, their first thought was to escape. Encountering such a monster that they couldn't fight, their psychological defenses had already collapsed. They didn't have any thoughts of fighting at all. All they were left with was fear. They only wanted to stay as far away from the monster as possible. In fact, even if they wanted to fight, they could only be food for Little Lee. None of you are allowed to run. Zhouwen flicked his sleeve and sent the few people running at the front back. Zhouwen, are you going to wipe out my Wang family? Wang Huaiduan shouted sternly. Have we forgotten how this monster came to be? If you run in all directions, you will return here from different directions. Then, what about the people who aren't with you? Will they be duplicated? Zhouwen asked. In fact, Zhouwen's explanation was already very simple. If everyone was separated and returned from different directions, then all of them would be duplicated to others. Everything would be in chaos. Although this situation might not happen, Zhouwen couldn't take such a risk. Run in one direction. Wang Lu was the first to react as she led the others in a direction. Only then did everyone come to a realization. However, a few people were sucked into Little Lee's body as he continued pouncing at the others. There's no need to run. Wang Lu, try using your companion beasts to stop him, Zhouwen said to Wang Lu. When Wang Lu heard Zhouwen, she didn't hesitate at all as she ordered the white bear to charge at Little Lee. Previously, so many people had used companion beasts. No matter what species they were all fused with Little Lee's body. However, when the white bear charged at Little Lee dodged and didn't let the white bear touch his body. Why doesn't he dare touch the white bear? Is it because the white bear's stats counter him? Wang Lu was slightly taken aback before she looked at Zhouwen in pleasant surprise. I don't think it's the white bear's stats that counter him, but you, Zhouwen said after some thought. Me? Wang Lu looked at Zhouwen in puzzlement. This is only my guess. You are the only one in the Wang family who hasn't hatched any duplicated companion eggs, right? I think that's the key, Zhouwen said. You mean? Wang Lu's expression turned nasty. She wasn't happy because of this. If Zhouwen's guess was right, it meant that there was something wrong with the duplicated items. The white bear kept chasing after Little Lee, but Little Lee's movement technique was extremely strange. The Terragrade white bear couldn't catch up to him, but it also created some trouble for Little Lee, preventing him from chasing after the others. When the Wang family saw that the white bear was holding Little Lee back, they secretly heaved a sigh of relief. However, before they could finish heaving a sigh of relief, their expressions turned even uglier. Little Lee didn't chase after them again. Instead, he pounced at the items piled on the ground. There were all sorts of companion eggs and treasures. After Little Lee pounced in, his body was like a magnet. The items tried their best to approach him and strangely fused into his body. It's over. It's all over. The Wong family was dumbfounded. Everything, including the original companion eggs and the duplicated companion eggs, fused with Little Lee's body. It looked like nothing was left behind. Little Lee's body seemed to undergo a strange change due to absorbing a large number of items. His black hair turned whiter and his eyes were like those of a blind person. Furthermore, they were getting whiter as though light was gathering inside. Now, many members of the Wong family were filled with regret. If they had known this would happen, they wouldn't have doubted Zhou. They would have gotten rid of the scourge, Little Lee. End of this chapter. Chapter 1747. Everyone just wanted to escape, but they also knew that escaping was useless. Not to mention the possibility of more monsters like Little Lee appearing, there was no way to escape this place. No matter how much they ran, they would eventually come back, and it would be difficult to escape death. Wang Lu controlled the white bear to charge at Little Lee, who was fusing all sorts of items. This time, Little Lee didn't dodge. Looking at the roaring white bear, he suddenly extended a hand and pressed down on the white bear's open mouth. The Terragrade white bear was pressed to the ground. No matter how it struggled, it couldn't get up at all. In the next second, the spot where the white bear and Little Lee's palm touched sank into his palm like something else. My companion beast can't take it anymore. Wang Lu was alarmed as she wanted to retrieve the white bear, but how could she do so? In a moment, the white bear was sucked into Little Lee's palm. Little Lee's entire body suffused a strange white light, especially his hair and eyes. They were indescribably strange. The faces of the Wong family members were ashen. They originally wanted to count on Wang Lu's companion beast, but now, even Wang Lu's companion beast was useless. They immediately felt like they had lost their support. Zhou frowned as he looked at Little Lee. The sure domain kept circulating as it analyzed the power laws on Little Lee's body, but the speed of analysis was extremely slow. However, what was certain was that Little Lee had the power laws of time and space, but they were somewhat different. Perhaps it was the legendary spacetime power. Moments later, the pile of items was sucked into Little Lee's body. Little Lee's body emitted a strange white light as it floated in the air. He was like a white devil enveloped in a demonic light. His white hair hung down quietly, and his completely white eyes seemed to reflect all the sin in the world. Zhou, what do we do? Wang Lu was out of ideas. The situation had already exceeded her control. Kill him. Zhou condensed the power of Brahma and his body was immediately wrapped in dark gold armor as he threw a punch at Little Lee. A destructive beam of light blasted at Little Lee's body. The power was enough to destroy a calamity-grade expert, but when the beam struck Little Lee, it passed through without causing any damage to his body. When the Wong family saw Zhou take action, they realized that he was an expert, but now their hearts chilled. How could they care about anything else? All of them fled in all directions. Despite knowing that they couldn't escape, they had to live as long as they could. Zhou punched out again and again, but the destructive power of the heaven incineration failed to touch Monster Lee's body. It passed through his body as though his body didn't exist. Xiao Li's figure flashed and disappeared from everyone's sight. When he reappeared, he grabbed the head of a Wong family disciple and sucked them into his body. Zhou switched primordial energy arts and attempted to attack Monster Lee with different powers, but no matter what power he used, it was as though he was slashing at nothingness when he struck Monster Lee. It passed through his body without causing any damage. Instead, it was Little Lee who teleported again and again, catching the fleeing members of the Wong family and sucking them into his body. Wang Lu summoned companion beasts that charged at Monster Little Lee, but it was difficult for them to produce any good effects. They were sucked into Monster Little Lee's body. Zhou, I shouldn't have brought you here. Wang Lu sighed. Zhou said, don't say useless things. This fellow is indeed a little troublesome. If I'm not wrong, this fellow should be a product of spacetime. His strength should have already reached the calamity grade, but my strength should be stronger than his. That's why he didn't directly absorb my strength. However, because he has the powers of spacetime, it's difficult for my strength to hit his body. This is a little troublesome. Why can't you hit him? Wang Lu hurriedly asked, hoping to help Zhou. According to my guess, he should be able to switch to different spacetime at will. It looks like my strength hits him, but in fact, he's already in a different spacetime. No matter how strong I am, I can't penetrate spacetime and hit him in another spacetime. Zhou explained. Is there no other way? Wang Lu was burning with anxiety. Unless I also have the powers of spacetime and can break through the restrictions of spacetime, I won't be able to do anything to him. Unfortunately, I only have the powers of space, but I don't have the powers of time, much less the powers of spacetime, Zhou sighed. Wang Lu felt even more despair when she heard that. Seeing the Wang family members being absorbed by Monster Little, she said sadly, I don't have the powers of spacetime, nor do I have any companion beasts of the spacetime element. From the looks of it, we really won't be able to escape this calamity. Companion beast? Zhou pondered and said, You have reminded me. You have a companion beast of the spacetime element? Wang Lu was overjoyed. No. Zhou shook his head. You. Wang Lu didn't know what to feel. She felt that she should be angry, but at this point in time, she felt that there was no point in being angry. However, I have a strange companion beast. Perhaps I can give it a try. Zhou wasn't worried that he would die here. He had already figured out something. Monster Little had grown up by absorbing the things here, but up to now, there wasn't a single calamity grade here. There weren't any calamity grade companion eggs among the things replicated. Even if he absorbed all the things and people here, he would at most be at the calamity grade. It was impossible for him to advance to the apocalypse. Even if Zhou couldn't kill him, he couldn't do anything to Zhou. As for the box Wang Lu had previously placed there, Zhou guessed that it was empty. Or perhaps it wasn't a calamity-grade companion egg inside. The real calamity-grade companion egg should be in the box Wang Lu had given Zhou. Zhou was somewhat impressed by Wang Lu's foresight. If Wang Lu really placed the calamity-grade companion egg there to replicate and replicated so many calamity-grade companion eggs, who knew how much Little would grow if he absorbed them? Then quickly give it a try. Wang Lu said anxiously. All right. With a thought, an extremely black companion beast that resembled a shadow appeared in front of Zhou. It was none other than the Mystic Tharch companion beast he had just obtained. I hope it works. Zhou ordered the Mystic Tharch to attack Little. The Mystic Tharch companion beast was very strange. It didn't have any skills, but its other stats were top-notch. However, Zhou had previously attempted to get the Mystic Tharch to fight, but he realized that the Mystic Tharch wasn't a strength-type melee companion beast. Chapter 1748. It was as though there was an invisible weapon in the Mystic Tharch's hand. Every time it flashed, dimensional creatures would be killed. It was extremely strange. Zhou didn't have the time to do further research before he followed Wang Lu to Lop Nur. Therefore, Zhou didn't fully understand the Mystic Tharch's abilities. However, after seeing Monster Li, Zhou had some guesses. Could the Mystic Tharch's abilities be related to spacetime powers? Of course, it was only related. The Mystic Tharch's power wasn't spacetime. At least, it wasn't ordinary spacetime powers. The Mystic Tharch was dressed in extremely black armor like a female warrior in the shadows. Her body resembled the purple star sovereign. When Monster Li saw the Mystic Tharch, it was unknown if he knew that his strength was inferior or if there was some other reason, but he actually teleported in another direction. However, at the same time he teleported, The mystic Tharch had already appeared beside him like a ghost and swept past Monster Lee. The white light on Monster Lee's body changed as his entire body became illusory and unreal. It was as though he had entered another space-time continuum. He didn't seem to be injured. Is the mystic Thearka's power equally ineffective? Zhou frowned slightly. Just as Zhou thought that he needed to think of another solution, he saw the mystic Tharch head towards Monster Lee again. However, this time, she didn't directly attack Monster Lee. Instead, she waved her right hand like a saber. Zhou immediately widened his eyes. Under Shi Yu and his own gaze, he clearly saw the space-time powers on Monster Lee's body being sliced apart. The feeling was indescribable. It was as though there was a layer of transparent tempered glass between Monster Lee and the mystic Tharch. The mystic Thearka's slash had forcefully split the transparent barrier into two, or rather, it could be said that a door had been split open. This was just Zhou Wen's own feeling. To ordinary people, the mystic Tharch had only casually waved her hand as though nothing had happened. After this wave, the mystic Tharch took a step forward and swept past the monster, literally. In the next second, Monster Lee's head flew into the air, as though it had been sliced off by a sharp blade. Bam! The head that flew up and the body that fell to the ground exploded at the same time, and a translucent ball of light that was constantly changing fell out. Domain Core. Zhou was pleasantly surprised. He never expected this thing to have a domain core in its body. The instant Shaoli died, the area around the saltwater lake shook violently as if there was an earthquake. Then, everyone realized that the entrance stone that had disappeared earlier had reappeared not far away. The five-man team that had been waiting there also appeared in everyone's line of sight. The Wang family was pleasantly surprised. Without bothering to thank Zhou, all of them rushed to the entrance stone. "It's good to have you here." Wang Lu looked at Zhou as though she had a lot to say, but she was momentarily at a loss for words. In the end, she only said that. "Why are you standing on ceremony with me? Can you give me this domain core?" Zhou asked as he pointed at the domain core. "It was yours to begin with," Wang Lu said in disappointment. "I really need this. Then, I won't stand on ceremony. If you find a dimensional zone that suits you in the future, I'll help you get the domain core." Zhou didn't stand on ceremony as he picked up the domain core. "Let's go. This dimensional zone is a little strange. It doesn't seem like that's all. Don't fall into it again later." Zhou pulled Wang Lu out and met up with the Wang family in front of the entrance stone. The Wang family had suffered heavy losses this time. More than 10 mythical creatures had died, and there were 2 at the terror grade. More importantly, the companion eggs that the Wang family had accumulated for a long time had been lost. However, this was already a rather good outcome. If it wasn't for Zhou, they would probably have been wiped out. Before leaving, Zhou secretly returned the box Wang Lu had given him to her. "Take care." Zhou patted Wang Lu on the head. He wanted to comfort her, but he didn't know what to say. He wasn't someone who knew how to comfort others. "Take care too." Wang Lu's expression was somewhat strange. Just as Zhou turned around and was about to leave, Wang Lu suddenly said, "If I have nowhere to go one day, will you take me in?" "Of course, but I believe with your luck you won't reach that stage," Zhou said with a smile. "I'll remember what you said." Wang Lu seemed somewhat serious. Zhou didn't think too much about it. All he wanted to do now was find a safe place and see if a domain core could advance the Godfiend era to a calamity. Also, he had to figure out the mystic Thearka's abilities as soon as possible. The power that the mystic Tharch had displayed made Zhou think of a very important matter. The mystic Tharch had torn through spacetime to kill the monster, literally. If this ability was used elsewhere, it would be of great help to Zhou. He directly used spatial teleportation to return to guide Ancient City. Zhou returned to his room and impatiently took out the domain core before switching to the Godfiend era Essence Energy Art. As the Essence Energy Art circulated, The domain core in Zhou Wen's hand transformed into transparent wisps of light that seeped into his body from his hands. The Cape family in the West District. The golden-haired middle-aged man came in front of the Cape family head and said with a strange expression, "Family head, there's news from the Wang family in the East District. Wang Lu and company have returned." What happened? Can that dimensional zone really replicate companion eggs? Family head Cape looked up and stared at the golden-haired middle-aged man. Clearly, he took this matter very seriously. "I don't know," the golden-haired middle-aged man said with a bitter smile. "You don't know? What did the people who infiltrated the Wang family say?" Family head Cape stared at him and said, "None of them returned. They said that they died in Lop Nor," the golden-haired middle-aged man said. "None of them came back alive?" Patriarch Cape frowned. "No, none of them returned. Could it be that they were discovered by the Wang family? Exploring some magical dimensional zone is fake, and taking the opportunity to get rid of them?" After some thought, the golden-haired middle-aged man realized that there was only one possibility. "From the looks of it, we have underestimated the Wang family. Since that dimensional zone is fake, this matter ends here. You may leave." Family head Cape lowered his head and continued studying the item in his hand. A Wang family wasn't worth his anger. Furthermore, the Wang family was a family in the East District after all. It would be very difficult for the Cape family to touch the Wang family. On the Rubik's Cube ranking list, more and more alien races appeared on it, but there was still no human on it. Although there were humans who tried to enter the ranking list, the result was that they couldn't even pass the fog lake, let alone pick the golden apple. Seeing those aliens act arrogantly up there really pisses me off. Li Xian was feeling depressed watching the livestream when he saw Feng Chuyen and Ming Xiu walk over. His eyes immediately lit up as he walked over with a smile. He hugged their shoulders with one arm each. "Are we good brothers? You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.